Chapter 186. Xiaoqing's words were very frank, but the seller understood that Xiaoqing wanted to slap him in the face. He immediately said unhappily, "Oh, is it a high-level mutant plant? Maybe it's a twice-mutated plant." He had to admit that he really knew the truth. Xiaoqing was really a level 4 paranormal, and her vines had already mutated for the third time. However, Xiaoqing didn't mean to show off at all. She smiled and was ready to leave. Why should she show off to a shop owner? It was cool to slap someone in the face, but it would attract hatred. She had just arrived in the capital, and it was not good to be too high-profile. However, Yin Qiue didn't want to see his fiancée being bullied, so he immediately sneered, "Judging from your tone, it's not as simple as looking down on people. Qing, take out your worst mutant plant and show it to him. Let him broaden his horizons. When he looks at people in the future, don't look at them from the crack of the door. It's easy to see yourself as a cross-eyed person." Xiaoqing said helplessly, "Let's go eat something. I'm hungry after walking for so long." The shop owner immediately said, "Don't. Let me broaden my horizons." Xiaoqing had no choice but to let the man-eating flower out. Every time the flower came out, it was like a reincarnated hungry ghost. It followed the smell to the food, and its saliva was about to drip out. A liquid that looked like saliva dripped from the petals and landed on the floor. Immediately, green smoke rose. The floor was made of ceramic tiles, so it was quite sturdy. However, when the saliva-like liquid dripped down, it immediately corroded a small hole. The flower shook its head and immediately set its eyes on the pitcher plant. Probably because two tigers couldn't live on the same mountain, it rushed up and directly broke the glass cover. Then, it swallowed the trembling pitcher plant in one gulp. After swallowing it, the flower exhaled a fishy sweet smell like a burp. Then, it nestled at Xiaoqing's feet with satisfaction. Xiaoqing touched its head, and then said embarrassedly, "The flower is used to being free, and I can't control it. I'm really sorry for the loss. How many crystal cores does this pitcher plant cost? Just take it that I'm buying it." The seller was silent for a moment. To be honest, as soon as this man-eating flower came out, he knew that he was going to be slapped in the face. The big flower's corolla was twice the size of an ordinary man-eating flower. The color was gorgeous, and when the petals wriggled, he could see the shark-like stamen inside. It was much better than his nepenthes. Then, as expected, he was slapped in the face. Yin Qiue sneered at the side. He adjusted the angle of his lips slightly, and the sneer turned into mockery. "Qing, I'll pay for you. Make me feel that it's not worth the price." The sound of the slap was so loud that he almost couldn't hear it. The seller's lips twitched, and in the end, he cupped his hands and said, "I'm too short-sighted. Take this nepenthes as a gift from me. Please accept my apologies." The shop owner was quite good at dealing with people. Since other people greeted him with a smile, Xiaoqing naturally understood the situation. Before she left, she still took a dozen level 2 zombie crystal cores and put them on the table. After leaving the shop, the way Kai Yingying looked at Xiaoqing changed. How should she put it? Although Kai Yingying didn't think that Yin Qiue was telling the truth, that this man-eating flower was the worst among all the mutant plants she had. However, this man-eating flower had already defeated most of the mutant plants with wood power. Didn't you see that the pitcher plant didn't dare to resist? Xiaoqing's strength was definitely not low. She had to slightly change her strategy towards Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing's strength was higher than she had imagined, so she couldn't use too rough means. Although Kai Yingying had always thought that Xiaoqing must have some strength, otherwise, even if she was beautiful, it was impossible for her to bring a child into a team with her body alone. However, the facts told her that Xiaoqing's strength was definitely not low. She had joined the team with her own strength. Kai Yingying had always thought that Yin Qiue was the captain. After all, it was Yin Qiue who made the decisions in the beginning. After leaving the shop, Xiaoqing took a group of people to eat. After all, even if she wasn't hungry, Yin Qiue and the others would be. Kai Yingying picked the place to eat. After all, Kai Yingying was more familiar with the capital, so it was easy for her to find a place. It was said that this restaurant was very high-end in the capital. All kinds of leaders and senior members of major mercenary groups would come here to eat. Correspondingly, the price here was relatively high. Before entering the door, Kai Yingying patted her chest and said that she would pay. Xiaoqing was about to refuse, but then she glanced at the menu and didn't say anything. A dish of stir-fried meat with green pepper cost 81 nuclei. Even if she had money, it would be painful for her to spend it. However, in the doomsday, most plants were difficult to grow. Even if they were grown, they would mutate. Some of them would mutate and produce toxins. If one tried it carelessly, he or she might be poisoned to death. Therefore, the price of vegetables was even higher than that of meat. This was very normal in the base. Xiaoqing looked through the menu and finally ordered 2 dishes, stir-fried meat with green pepper and stir-fried eggs with tomatoes. Yin Chiyue gave her face and ordered a lot of dishes. When he was ordering, he looked at the price first, then the name of the dish. The dishes he ordered, not to mention the taste, first of all, the price looked very scary. As for Gu Chuan and the others, they didn't order at all. They let Yin Chiyue order all the dishes. Let alone Kai Yingying, even Xiaoqing felt a little painful. More importantly, after Yin Chiyue ordered, he smacked his lips and said, "Give me a bottle of wine. It's our first time in the capital, and we're all gathered together. Don't drink too much. Give me a bottle of red wine to set the atmosphere. I'm a poor person, and I really want to try 1982 La Fight or 1984 Modally Hero. Just give me a bottle." Kai Yingying's fingers twitched. After a while, she said, "There might not be a 1984 Modally Hero here. There shouldn't be a 1982 La Fight either." The waiter standing aside said kindly, "There's number 1984 Modally Hero here, but there's a 1982 La Fight." Kai Yingying was speechless. "Then how about a bottle of 1982 La Fight? What do you think?" "Of course, I'll listen to you." Yin Chiyue looked at Kai Yingying and deliberately showed a charming smile. Kai Yingying immediately felt a little dizzy. She was dazzled by his beauty. She immediately nodded and said, "No problem. Isn't it a 1982 La Fight? Give me a bottle." Yin Chiyue kept his expression and continued to look at the menu. How could he let go of the opportunity to rip off a spendthrift so easily? Then he ordered a few dishes that weren't considered precious before the apocalypse, but were extremely expensive after the apocalypse. Kai Yingying's heart was bleeding. She was quite rich. After all, she had a rich father. Her father would give her a sum of crystal nuclei every once in a while for her to spend. However, the amount was certainly not a lot. After all, crystal nuclei were obtained through fighting. Because of Yin Chiyue's exploitation, the crystal nuclei she had saved for a long time were about to be used up. Sure enough, after Yin Chiyue stopped, the attendant at the side immediately smiled and said, "Shang Hui, 2,538 grade 1 crystals. I'll round it off for you. You only need 2,500 crystals. Please come to the counter to settle the bill." Kai Yingying was speechless. Chapter 187. Although it was painful, it was just like how a man would pretend to be fat even if his face was swollen when he was trying to woo a girl. What made Kai Yingying want to vomit blood was that after the dishes were served, Yin Chiyue took a bite and said with disdain, "It can't be compared with what you made. It tastes so different." Kai Yingying was about to cry at that time. If she had spent money to buy Yin Chiyue's affection, it would have been fine. After all, she really liked Yin Chiyue, so it was worth it. However, she spent money to buy Yin Chiyue's disdain. Xiaoqing couldn't stand it anymore, so she poked Yin Chiyue. After all, they still needed Kai Yingying's help to find Air Dai's whereabouts, so it wasn't good for them to make things awkward. Yin Chiyue pouted his rosy lips, opened the wine, and poured himself a glass. Xiaoqing didn't like drinking, because she couldn't control her feelings after getting drunk. She felt very insecure. Yin Hanqing and Gu Chuan didn't drink either, but Gu Panpan insisted that he had never drunk such high-end wine in his life, so he wanted to try it. He poured a glass, and Kai Yingying and Lu Yusin drank the rest. Yin Chiyue only drank 1 glass. After drinking, he didn't say anything. He just held his chopsticks and looked at Xiaoqing seriously. Xiaoqing couldn't eat anymore. She silently picked up a piece of meat for Little Bun, then cleaned the spices and other spices on it. When Little Bun was almost finished, she didn't want to eat anymore. She waited for them to finish eating, then stood up and left together. As soon as Yin Chiyue stood up, she felt that something was wrong. Yin Chiyue walked straight and looked very stiff from the back. He almost hit the door frame because he didn't turn the corner. Xiaoqing instinctively pulled him to prevent him from hitting his beautiful face. Xiaoqing held Yin Chiyue's hand. Then he turned to look at Xiaoqing. His expression was very serious and calm, but Xiaoqing felt that his gaze was very blank. Yin Chiyue stared at Xiaoqing for a while. After a long time, his eyes lit up, and he threw himself on Xiaoqing. In broad daylight, he was panting and whining. He even said in a tone as if he was abandoned by a jerk, "I love you so much, but you don't love me. Don't you say I'm not cute? How am I not cute? Tell me, I'll change it. Tell me, you've touched my entire body so many times, I'll definitely be able to say it." Xiaoqing's expression was stupefied. She pinched Yin Chiyue's chin and looked at him carefully. Then she realized that Yin Chiyue was indeed drunk. His pupils were a little slack, and his gaze was blurry. Although he looked very serious on the outside, it was actually because there was no expression on his face. At this moment, Xiaoqing felt that the expressions of the people around them were strange. Their burning gazes pierced her body like needles, and there was a kind of thirst for gossip. She couldn't resist it. When Xiaoqing held Yin Chiyue, he was still rubbing himself against her, and as he did so, he whined, "I like you so much. I gave you my most precious first time. You have to be responsible for me. How can you like the new and dislike the old? Look at me, am I not good looking?" Xiaoqing silently slapped his face, and then said to her friends, "He's drunk. Let's stop here for today. Is there any place we can stay for the time being?" Kai Yingying, who was originally a little twisted from jealousy, immediately smiled and said, "Find a place to stay? Just stay at my house. We're all friends. Don't be polite with me." Chapter 188. Xiaoqing frowned slightly and said, "Chiyue is quite drunk. If it's too far away, I'm afraid he'll go crazy from the alcohol and won't be able to control himself. Let's just stay nearby. My house isn't far from here. Let's go to my house. It's much more convenient than staying outside," Kai Ying said fervently. She had already put it this way. If Xiaoqing still refused, it would be disrespectful. She said helplessly, "All right then. Sorry for the trouble." "It's no trouble, no trouble." Kai Yingying almost couldn't suppress the joy in her heart. Yin Chiyue was drunk and was about to move into her house. Wasn't this the best opportunity? After the group left the restaurant, they turned and went to Kai Yingying's house. Kai Yingying's house was in a small villa. Just by looking at the appearance of the house, it was more luxurious than the others. According to Kai Yingying, the row of villas nearby all belonged to her family. She could live there as she pleased. Kai Yingying naturally didn't bring Xiaoqing and the rest to her father's place. That would make many things inconvenient. She brought Xiaoqing and the rest to her own house. This kind of villa was a two-story villa. The top floor had a private theater and a swimming pool. Xiaoqing and the rest each chose a room to stay in. Yin Chiyue was placed beside Xiaoqing's room. However, after helping Yin Chiyue onto the bed, Xiaoqing was unable to leave. First, Yin Chiyue tugged at her, refusing to let her go no matter what. Tears were about to fall from her eyes as she begged to be whipped, her small waist swaying vigorously. After much difficulty, Yin Chiyue was finally tucked into bed. Xiaoqing was worried that he would have a headache when he woke up, so she made a bowl of hangover soup for Yin Chiyue to drink. Not long after, Kai Yingying came over with a bowl of honey water. "Sister Qing, I made a bowl of honey water. Drink it for Chiyue. It can help with the hangover." Xiaoqing didn't tell Kai Yingying that she had already given Yin Chiyue the hangover soup. She only smiled and took it. "Sorry to trouble you. I didn't expect him to pass out after one cup. Come and sit for a while." Kai Yingying quickly waved her hand. "What's the trouble? I won't be sitting. Sister Qing, you should rest early too." "Well, I have to take care of the children in a while. You were tired after a day. Go back and rest." Xiaoqing chuckled. Kai Yingying left wisely. After she left, Xiaoqing put the bowl of honey water on the table and went to the bathroom. After all, she had eaten a lot at noon and now she had to vomit it all out. Xiaoqing was now used to vomiting 3 times a day. In the beginning, it was very uncomfortable, but now it had become a common occurrence. When she finished vomiting and was about to pour some water to rinse her mouth, she saw Yin Hanqing sitting at the table. His expression was very cold, but his eyes were very indifferent. After Xiao Qing came out, she poured herself a bowl of water. "Why are you here? Come and take a look. He's quite drunk. I'm afraid you can't handle him alone." Yin Hanqing pursed his lips. Xiao Qing drank some water and rinsed her mouth. Then she said, "Are you thirsty? I'll get you a glass of water." Yin Hanqing picked up the bowl Kai Yingying brought and said, "It's not cold yet. I'll drink this." After taking a sip, he found that it was sweet. He was stunned. "Is this honey water for Yin Chiue?" He drank the hangover soup. "You drink it." Xiao Qing looked at the time and said, "I'll have to trouble you to help him take a bath later. He must be uncomfortable sleeping with the smell of alcohol. I'll go back and see if the children are naughty." "You go. Leave this to me," Yin Hanqing said softly. Xiao Qing was relieved and went back to her room. Yin Hanqing helped the drunk Yin Chiue to the bathroom. Chapter 189. Bathing a drunkard was a very troublesome matter, especially when the drunkard was so drunk that he was unconscious. Yin Hanqing struggled for nearly an hour before he finished bathing Yin Chiue and pulled him out of the bathtub. Perhaps it was because he had stayed in the bathroom for too long, but Yin Hanqing kept feeling a little hot. He unbuttoned his collar and sat on the stool beside the bed, waiting for Xiao Qing to come back. After a while, there was a knock on the door. Yin Hanqing thought it was Xiao Qing, and his heart suddenly stirred. The words that he usually did not dare to say or do became an indescribable impulse that lingered in his chest. Yin Hanqing took a deep breath and went to open the door. Before a smile appeared in his eyes, he saw Kai Yingying. Kai Yingying was also stunned. "Where's Sister Qing?" "She went back to take care of the child," Yin Hanqing said with a little disappointment. Kai Yingying's eyes were a little anxious. She forced a smile and said, "Brother Qing, you should go back and rest too. I'll take care of Chiu. After walking for so long, everyone is tired." Yin Hanqing shook his head and said, "I'm not tired. You go back and rest. I'll take care of him." Kai Yingying hurriedly said, "Let me do it. I know how to take care of someone better." "No need. I just bathed him." What he meant was that Yin Hanqing was still naked, and it was not suitable for a girl to come and take a look. Kai Yingying was completely dumbfounded because Yin Hanqing closed the door after he finished speaking. She stood at the door for a long time, feeling very uneasy. In the end, she gritted her teeth and left. It seemed that it would be very difficult to make a move tonight. Yin Hanqing sat in the room, feeling more and more stuffy. His collar, which had already unbuttoned a button, was now unbuttoned again. A small part of his honey-colored chest was already exposed. He used his fingertips to wipe his forehead, and there were already small beads of sweat seeping out. Even the slowest person could sense that something was wrong. He was a little uneasy, and an increasingly obvious burning sensation slowly rose from his lower abdomen. It would be a lie if he did not know what was happening to him. Yin Hanqing was a little helpless. He had been fatally injured before, and his heart had almost been pierced. His ribs had been broken 3 times, and other minor injuries were needless to say. However, he had never been in such an embarrassing moment. Other than embarrassment, he was also panicked. After sitting in a daze for a long time, Yin Hanqing sneaked into the bathroom like a thief. He was prepared to solve this problem before Xiao Qing came. Not long after he entered the bathroom, Xiao Qing came over. Xiao Qing knocked on the door, but no one came to open it. The door was not locked, and she twisted it open. There was no one in the room, only Yin Chiue lying quietly on the bed. His fair face had an intoxicating blush, and that extreme white and extreme red created a huge contrast. It was so gorgeous that it made people want to take a bite out of him. Xiao Qing's heart was a little itchy. She sat on the side of the bed and lifted the blanket to take a look. Then, she realized that Yin Chiue was not wearing anything, and there was even a smell of shower fragrance on his body as he lay under the blanket. Xiao Qing was speechless. She decisively covered herself with the blanket. What the eye does not see, the heart does not grieve over. The moment she covered herself with the blanket, Xiao Qing instantly had this thought in her mind. Anyway, she had seen his entire body, and more than once, so what was there to be shy about? With that thought, Xiao Qing silently lifted the corner of the blanket and stuffed Yin Chiue's slender arm under it. Probably because she had a guilty conscience, she suddenly heard a suppressed low moan. Although it was just a sound, and very much like an auditory hallucination, it made Yin Chiyue withdraw her hand with a whoosh. She calmly looked to the left, in the direction of the bathroom. The sound seemed to have come from there. After a long time, just when Xiaoqing thought that she was hallucinating, another sexy and low moan was heard. Chapter 190. She took a deep breath and went into the bathtub. She carefully washed herself inside and out 3 times before getting out of the bathtub. Her body was clean and her strong recovery ability had removed all traces. However, Xiaoqing still felt very uncomfortable, both inside and outside. Yin Hanqing was different from Yin Chiyue and Air Dai. Although he was usually very quiet, he was full of aggressiveness at that time. Xiaoqing remembered the feeling of being unable to control everything. After coming out of the bathroom, Xiaoqing calmed down and decided to put this matter behind her. Then she went to the kitchen to make a bowl of soup for Yin Chiyue. Yin Chiyue was drunk yesterday. Although he didn't drink much, his stomach was very weak and needed to be warmed up. Xiaoqing didn't know that while she was busy, Yin Chiyue opened his eyes and quietly looked at the kitchen. His eyes were almost filled with blood. He got drunk quickly and woke up quickly. He woke up before midnight last night, which meant that he listened to live sex for half the night. At this time, if one opened his hands to take a look, one would find that his palms were full of crescent-shaped bruises and dried blood on his palms and fingernails. Yin Chiyue bit his index finger and stared at the remaining button on the ground. The murderous intent in his eyes was about to condense. Soon, his index finger was bitten until it was dripping with blood, and his flesh was torn open. When Yin Chiyue estimated that Xiaoqing was about to come out, he opened his palms and stuck out his pink tongue to lick the blood on his palms and fingernails clean. He didn't want Xiaoqing to find out that he was actually sober last night. He also didn't want Xiaoqing to know that he was full of murderous intent. God knew how much Yin Chiyue wanted to kill all the men around Xiaoqing and lock her up. Only he could get close to her, and only he could see her. It didn't matter if Xiaoqing vented her anger on him. He could let Xiaoqing vent her anger on him. It didn't matter if she hit or scolded him. Yin Chiyue even thought that Xiaoqing might be angry at him. However, she was a person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. As long as she didn't know that he killed her teammates, she wouldn't hurt him even if he put her under house arrest. After all, she cared about everyone around her. As long as that person entered her heart, this cold-blooded, murderous woman would give him endless tolerance and gentleness. But as soon as he thought about it, Yin Chiyue didn't want to hurt Xiaoqing like this anymore. Yin Chiyue turned around and rolled over. The little devil in his heart kept clamoring to kill Yin Hanqing, kill Gu Chuan, and kill all the men who wanted to steal her away from him. Before he could roll himself into a ball, Xiaoqing had already walked out with the soup. When Xiaoqing saw Yin Chiyue rolling around on the bed with the quilt, the awkwardness in her heart instantly surged up. Yin Chiyue couldn't have heard it, right? Or maybe he saw a little. Yin Chiyue naturally understood Xiaoqing's thoughts. He hurriedly said pitifully, "Ah Qing, my head hurts." Xiaoqing's thoughts were immediately pulled away. She mercilessly mocked Yin Chiyue. "Why are you showing off when you can't drink? You were knocked out after 1 glass. Is it glorious to hug me and call me mommy when you're drunk?" Yin Chiyue didn't feel ashamed at all. He was like a big worm, wriggling under the quilt. Finally, he wriggled in front of Xiaoqing and hugged Xiaoqing's waist. He blinked his eyes and said, "Actually, this is the first time I've drunk alcohol." His adoptive father was an alcoholic. This caused Yin Chiyue to hate alcohol since he was young. Later on, when he grew up, he hated alcohol even more because it made people lose their minds. If it wasn't for Xiaoqing by his side giving him a sense of security and him deliberately tormenting Kai Yingying, he definitely wouldn't have ordered alcohol, let alone drunk it. Chapter 191. In the end, the first time Yin Chiyue drank, it gave him the worst experience. First, he made a fool of himself after getting drunk. When he woke up, he had a splitting headache. More importantly, when he was drunk, someone took advantage of the situation and took advantage of Xiaoqing. Yin Chiyue hated Kai Yingying to death now. He was a smart person. Although he almost lost his mind because of what happened last night, It was only for a moment. After a moment, Yin Qiue figured it out. With Xiaoqing's personality, unless something happened to Yin Hanqing and she had to do that kind of thing to solve it, she wouldn't do it. Why did Yin Hanqing have to have sex with Xiaoqing? That was even simpler. It must be Chinese medicine. Then why was it Chinese medicine? It was most likely because of Kai Ying, and Kai Ying did it because of him. In the end, it was because of him. Drink the soup first before you talk. Xiaoqing pushed Yin Qiue's head away, ignoring his aggrieved face, and handed him the soup. Yin Qiue shamelessly acted coquettishly. Ah Qing, my head hurts. Feed me. You have a headache, not your hand. What does it have to do with you drinking the soup? Xiaoqing complained. Because of her guilty conscience, she fed Yin Qiue. Yin Qiue was very satisfied with the soup. After he finished, Xiaoqing put down the bowl and prepared to leave. I'm going back to check on the baby. It's not dawn yet. You can sleep for a while. Yin Qiue nodded obediently. Surprisingly, he didn't stick to Xiaoqing and then shrank into the bed. After Xiaoqing left, he lay in bed, calculating which of the drugs he had saved up could be used to kill that little bitch Kai Ying. If it weren't for her, Xiaoqing wouldn't have to. The more he thought about it, the angrier Yin Qiue became. He wanted to kill Yin Hanqing as well. Since he was young, he had never been so desperate to get someone. The feeling of not getting what he wanted almost drove him crazy. It should be said that he was a lunatic, but he learned to endure it for Xiaoqing. When Xiaoqing returned to the room, she saw Xiaotong sleeping on the outside. Then, Little Bun hugged Yaya and nestled in the middle. Yaya's eyes were about to roll over from the pressure, and his only remaining ear was constantly trembling. Xiaoqing had to adjust the Little Bun's sleeping position before Yaya was released. The liberated Yaya looked at Xiaoqing gratefully. Every day, it struggled between being crushed to death and still having one breath left. If it wasn't for the fact that it might be turned into a braised rabbit head if it tried to run away, it would have used the fastest speed in its life to escape from Little Bun's evil clutches. Xiao was Xiao Yu's sleep of the night too? Xiaotong was Little Bun. She was Xiao sleeping. Xiao little, Xiao, Xiao of Avs. Xiaoqing didn't get into the bed. She went in with the cold air and found a corner to absorb it. She really didn't want the sun to rise, and she didn't want to see Yin Hanqing and Yin Qiue. The awkwardness was like gangrene attached to her bones, making her feel very uncomfortable. But no matter how much she prayed, the sun still rose. After Little Bun woke up, he groggily dragged Yaya out of bed. Yaya was dragged by his only remaining ear and stumbled on the ground, looking very pitiful. Little Bun was about to wash up out of habit when he saw Xiaoqing in the corner. Little Bun directly pounced into Xiaoqing's arms and called out Mama. After confirming that it was Xiaoqing, he curled up in Xiaoqing's arms and played dead. Xiaoqing had no choice but to carry him to wash up. After the last time, Little Bun had a side effect, which was that he became even more attached to Xiaoqing. After all, it was the first time he was separated from Xiaoqing for so long. Although children didn't have a sense of time, Little Bun still became more dependent on Xiaoqing. No matter what, you should walk around first. Xiaoqing didn't want to stay any longer. Even if she knew that Kai Ying had the ability to make it easier for her to find air dye in the capital, Xiaoqing didn't want to stay for a minute longer. After such an embarrassing thing happened, she even had the intention to kill Kai Ying. If she stayed any longer, Xiaoqing was afraid that she wouldn't be able to control herself and would really kill Kai Ying. If that happened, Kai Ying's father would definitely take revenge. It would be a lot more troublesome for her to find air dye. We're really not going to walk around anymore. We still have things to do, so we won't trouble you. We'll meet again if fate wills it. Xiaoqing smiled slightly and prepared to leave with her people. Kai Ying still wanted to urge them to stay, but someone ran over and said while panting, "Miss, the leader is calling for you. He wants you to hurry over. He has something to tell you." Kai Ying hurriedly said, "Sister Qing, please don't leave. I'll be back soon." Before she left, she still called for the person who came to find her to help her keep Xiaoqing and the others. After all, if Xiaoqing left, it would be pure fate to meet them again. Kai Ying liked Yin Qiue a lot. She wanted to keep Yin Qiue and Xiaoqing by her side. After Kai Yingying left, Xiaoqing prepared to leave. However, the person stopped Xiaoqing and refused to let her go. You mustn't leave. Before Miss left, she told me to keep you guys here. If you leave, Miss will beat me to death when she comes back. What does it have to do with me if Kai Yingying wants to beat you to death? Xiaoqing resisted the urge to roll her eyes and turned to leave. Then, the person hugged her thigh. The person was also a talent. He lay on the ground and hugged Xiaoqing's thigh, crying. Just stay a little longer. Miss will be back soon. Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She threw out a vine and dragged him away, hanging him on the corner of the table. Then, she left with Little Bun and the others. She had wasted enough time. She had to find air dye. Fortunately, Xiaoqing had a preliminary understanding of the situation in Jingdu. Now, the first step was to go to the mission hall. That was the place with the most paranormals in Jingdu. If there was no other way, Xiaoqing would release a mission to find air dye. Air dye wasn't stupid. He was smarter than most people. Even if he was alone, he could definitely hide his identity. What she needed to do was to release the mission. Whether someone found air dye, had news about air dye, or air dye saw the mission and heard the news, she would have a chance to find air dye. The northern part of the Kyoto survivor base belonged to the northeast. That place could be said to be freezing cold. After the apocalypse, the climate had become even more unpredictable. If Xiaoqing still couldn't find air dye in Kyoto, he would have to continue north. However, air dye wouldn't wander so far away, right? If he woke up, he would definitely follow the direction and go back to find them. Xiaoqing's mood was very complicated as she walked and thought. After walking out of the door, she chose a direction and walked forward. Not long after, she saw a somewhat familiar figure. I've already searched all the survivor bases near the mission location. Kyoto is the only one left. That's easy. You should leave this to me. Although my mercenary group isn't big, we still have some power in Kyoto. It's much more convenient than you guys searching everywhere. We can also go to the mission hall and register a mission to find your companion. Sister Qing, stay. Tell me what your companion looks like. I'll let my subordinates look for him. I'll let you guys know if there's any news, Kai Ying hurriedly said. Xiaoqing thought for a moment and said, he's young and mute. His temper is like a child's. His bangs are a bit long and cover his eyes. After explaining air dye's characteristics, Gu Panpan asked, get me a pen and paper. I can draw a portrait. She was an art student. Although she hadn't learned for a long time, drawing a sketch was no problem for her. Chapter 194. Kai Ying quickly took them back to the villa and found a pen and paper for Gu Panpan. Gu Panpan drew air dye. Her sketch was not vivid, but it was quite similar. Kai Ying took the sketch and asked someone to make several copies. Then, she mobilized her men to start looking for air dye in the city. After that, she took Xiaoqing and the others to the mission hall. Sister Qing, please register the mission and leave your contact information. If there is any news, we can inform you. Xiaoqing described the mission. It was not only about looking for air dye, but also about finding air dye. She set the reward to be very high. There were 5 level 3 zombie crystals. Even Kai Ying swallowed her saliva when she saw the reward. After that, they went back to Kai Ying's villa. Although Xiaoqing did not want to go back, she endured it for the sake of air dye. After they went back, Kai Ying poured water for everyone and said, Sister Qing, you don't know yet. Something big is going to happen in Kyoto. What's the big deal? Xiaoqing asked, but she was thinking about air dye. She was a little anxious. If she couldn't find air dye in Jingdu, she could only go all the way north. But the further north she went, the less hope she had. Japan sent a small team to Kyoto to borrow food, said Qin Xiaobei. Although Kai Ying had many shortcomings in her personality, she was better than many rich second generations. She was a nationalistic youth. Kai Ying gnashed her teeth in hatred towards the small island nation that had a grudge against her motherland. Not only her, but many mercenary group leaders in Kyoto gathered for a meeting after hearing the news. The topic of the meeting was how to give the group of paranormals in Japan an unforgettable trip to the Celestial Empire. Japan is a small country. They import all their food. When the apocalypse broke out, their food import channel was cut off. There was not much food in the country. After these days of consumption, they almost ran out. So, they came to our country to borrow food. Kaiying gritted her teeth and said, "Why should we lend them food? We don't even have enough for ourselves." But the higher-ups want us to maintain the friendship between countries even in the apocalypse. If we can help, we should help. If we have food, we should give it to the survivors in the base. Why feed those animals? Xiaoqing grasped the main point. You're saying, the Japanese are coming over? Kaiying nodded hatefully. I heard that a small team has arrived. All of them are psychics. The leader is a descendant of the Onmyoji. They will arrive in the capital soon. Xiaoqing didn't want to stay, but now that she was asked to leave, she wouldn't. She hadn't experienced those 8 dark years, but she had heard her instructor and coach talk about it countless times. There were also countless missions that were related to destroying that country's private human experiments. Perhaps in the eyes of some people, there were good and bad people in every race, and that race was no exception. Hatred was also a part of hatred. However, in Xiaoqing's eyes, that entire race was almost rotten. She felt disgusted just by looking at it. Since the Japanese psychics were coming over, she couldn't leave. Even if she couldn't slap them in the face, she had to watch that group of people cry and leave. Oh, no. If she found Dummy during this period, she might ambush those paranormals on their way back and make them stay in the Celestial Empire forever. After getting more information about the Japanese team from Kaiying, Xiaoqing quietly waited for the news. She didn't leave the villa for the whole day. She was afraid that if she left, she would miss the news about Erdai. Yin Chiyue and Yin Hanqing sat on either side of Xiaoqing and accompanied her as she waited. The two of them didn't look at each other, and it was quite harmonious. Chapter 195. Unfortunately, Xiaoqing waited for a whole day, but there was no news about Erdai. She couldn't help but feel annoyed. Let's wait for 2 more days. If there is still no news, we'll continue north. Now, let's go back and rest. Xiaoqing gritted her teeth and said she would never give up looking for Erdai. If she couldn't find him in the north, she would come back and look for him again. The Celestial Empire was only so big. She would find Erdai after looking around once, twice, or 3 times. After everyone returned to their rooms, including Xiao Tong, who had brought the little bun back to sleep, Xiaoqing walked to the balcony. She rummaged through her space for a while and finally found a pack of cigarettes. She lit one up. Actually, Xiaoqing didn't smoke much. People who really smoked would inhale into their lungs. She, on the other hand, only inhaled and exhaled. As the smoke swirled around her, her originally irritated mood really did improve a little. The sun slowly sank, but the moon couldn't be seen rising, and the stars couldn't be seen shining. There were only layers of dark clouds, dark and heavy, blocking all the light. Xiaoqing didn't know how long she stayed on the balcony. There was only 1 cigarette left in the pack, and it flickered between Xiaoqing's fingers. As soon as Yin Chiyue came, he choked on the strong smoke and coughed. He almost cried. He fanned the smoke lingering at the tip of his nose and walked up. "Qing, why aren't you sleeping?" Xiaoqing coughed and put out the cigarette, but didn't put it out. "I can't sleep. I feel annoyed." Yin Chiyue came over and hugged Xiaoqing's waist from behind. He then put his head on Xiaoqing's shoulder. "Don't worry. We'll definitely find it." God knew how jealous he was when he saw Xiaoqing so anxious. He thought countless times in his heart about how to kill all the men who dared to approach Xiaoqing and how to imprison Xiaoqing in a place where only he could see. However, when he saw Xiaoqing's cold eyes, all his thoughts disappeared. No matter how ruthless and good he wanted to be, he couldn't do it. He was afraid that she would hate him, so he suppressed all the dirty and rotten thoughts in the depths of his heart. He was afraid that Xiaoqing would find out if he revealed even a little of it. If Xiaoqing showed a trace of disgust for him in her eyes, he would directly destroy himself. Thinking about it, all the pride he had in his life became dust under her feet after meeting her. At first, Yin Chiyue didn't believe it. He didn't believe that there was a woman who could make him fall in love with her. He also didn't believe that there would be someone in the world who would be willing to sacrifice their life for another person. Humans were such selfish and weak existences. How could they risk their lives for another person? Now he had to believe it because as long as Xiao Qing said a word, he would be willing to take out his heart for Xiao Qing. But it's been a day, and there is still no news. Xiao Qing stared at the flickering cigarette between her fingers. It had been crushed once, but it was still burning stubbornly. The irritation in her heart made her want to find someone to fight and vent her anger. Yin Qiue had to comfort Xiao Qing. Don't forget, the Jingdu survivor base is the largest survivor base in the country. The population is more than 10 million. It will take a few days to find all of them. Xiao Qing didn't say anything, but the irritation was getting deeper and deeper. She stared at the cigarette in her hand and suddenly pressed the cigarette, but on the back of her hand. The cigarette but made contact with the skin on the back of her hand and made a sizzling sound. The smell of burned flesh filled the air, but Xiao Qing didn't feel much pain. When the cigarette but was moved away, the scar on her hand healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 196. Her Highness Queen didn't sleep for the entire night. She woke up early the next morning and made a pot of soup. She stewed a whole hen. After stewing the soup, she tore the hen apart and tore the meat into strips. Then, she added some ginger and chopped green onions to cook the meat. The taste was very delicious, especially the soup. This time, Xiao Qing stuffed some mushrooms and wood ear into the hen's belly. She took out a bowl of soup and put the rest of the meat together with the soup. That bowl of soup was reserved for Yin Qiue. When Kaiying's chef came to work with a yawn, he found that the meal was already ready. Breakfast shouldn't be too greasy. Although Xiao Qing's soup wasn't greasy, it was more suitable for drinking at night. If it weren't for Yin Qiue, she wouldn't have made it. Therefore, Xiao Qing made extra porridge, almond and barley porridge. When everyone woke up, the porridge was ready. Each person had a bowl with side dishes and chicken soup. Kaiying came over to have breakfast with them. During breakfast, Kaiying said, "The accurate news is out. The Japanese team will arrive this afternoon." Xiao Qing thought that it was the news from Air Dai. After hearing it, she couldn't help but feel disappointed. However, she quickly cheered up and said, "Oh, is this news confirmed?" Kaiying hurriedly nodded. "I also heard that although they came to borrow food this time, under the guise of an exchange, they said that they wanted the ability users of the two countries to learn from each other. Only then can they improve. Everyone is holding back their energy now, waiting for that group of people to come and teach them a good lesson." To put it bluntly, the population of the Celestial Empire was astonishing and dense. Therefore, when the apocalypse broke out, there were heavy casualties. But at the same time, the huge population allowed the number of paranormals to surpass other countries. Japan was just a small place. How many paranormals could there be? Coming over for an exchange was a good thing. At least, they could vent their anger. Xiao Qing narrowed her eyes and began to plan. When the time came, no matter what, she would sneak in and take a look. Although she couldn't win glory for the country, she wanted to see them get slapped in the face and vent her anger. Xiao Qing couldn't help but ask, "Is there any news about the person I'm looking for?" Kaiying was stunned for a moment and quickly said, "It's my fault. I forgot to tell you. This morning, someone provided information that they had seen a person who looked very similar to the portrait near a small Esper base near Yinjiang. I don't know if it's the person you're looking for." Xiao Qing suddenly stood up. "Which base? What's its name? How long ago was it?" "Sister Qing, don't worry. I'll go with you in a while. Anyway, that base is not far from the capital." Kaiying smiled and said, "It will only take 2 to 3 hours to go back and forth. We can still catch up with the Japanese entering the city." Xiao Qing put down her chopsticks and looked around. They were almost full, so she quickly said, "Everyone should be full, right? In that case, let's go there quickly." Yin Hanqing and the others all knew that Xiao Qing was eager to find Air Dai. Now that she finally had news about Air Dai, she couldn't control her emotions. They all put down their chopsticks. Kaiying originally wanted to pick Yin Qiue up and say a few words, but now she had to stand up. "Then let's go." Kaiying brought 2 espers with her. They were both beginner level 3 espers. Her father asked her to bring them along to protect her safety. Level 3 espers were not many. In Kaiying's entire mercenary group, The number of level 3 espers could be counted on one hand. If it wasn't for her father's love for her, he would never send level 3 espers to be her bodyguards. It should be known that in ordinary small and medium-sized mercenary groups, a beginner level 3 esper could be the leader. Chapter 197. Their destination was Pingcheng Survivor Base. The base was very small and named after Li Pingcheng. There should be a few thousand survivors in the base. They were all survivors from the nearby towns and were built by the townspeople. It wasn't far from the capital, only an hour and a half away. They were in a hurry, so it took them a little more than an hour to reach their destination. Kai Ying's father's mercenary group wasn't a big deal in the capital, but in a small base like this, it was a big deal. When the base chief heard that Kai Ying had brought people over, he led the higher-ups to greet them, giving Kai Ying enough face. The base chief, Li Pingcheng, accompanied them all the way inside. The ordinary people in the base couldn't help but look over. Kai Ying felt even more honored. She said to Li Pingcheng humbly, "This time, I came to your base to look for someone." Kai Ying took out the portrait. "I heard that this person appeared near your base, so I wanted to come and look for him. Mr. Li, can I trouble your base to put up a poster?" Li Pingcheng's gaze was complicated. After a while, he said, "No need. I know him. If you want to look for him, I can take you there." Xiao Qing was very happy. She quickly said, "Then I'll trouble you." Li Pingcheng led the few of them to a tent. The nearby tents were all very simple and crude. Most of the tents had skinny women sitting in front of them. Some of the women were basking in the sun, while others were chatting in groups of 2s and 3s. Li Pingcheng stood outside a tent and shouted, "Fu Jingma, someone is looking for you." When she heard the name, Xiao Qing was disappointed. Dai couldn't speak. How could he give himself a fake name? He must have found the wrong person. But then, the curtain was pulled open by a pale, thin hand. From inside, a face that Xiao Qing couldn't be more familiar with appeared. "Who is it?" The man raised his eyes lazily and raised his chin, which was slightly thinner than Dai. Xiao Qing was immediately stunned. The person in front of him looked exactly like Dai. The only difference was that he looked a few years older than Dai, so he was a little taller. Not only was Xiao Qing shocked, Yin Hanqing and the others were also shocked. Gu Panpin couldn't help but say, "Heavens, are they twins? Why does she look so much like Dai?" The young man was stunned for a moment and lowered his eyelids slightly. After a while, he raised his eyes and said, "You've met someone who looks exactly like me?" Xiao Qing was very disappointed. She thought that she would be able to meet Dai this time, but she only saw someone who looked exactly like Dai. Looking at this face, she missed him even more and felt even more impatient. "We found the wrong person," Xiao Qing said softly. "Let's go. We'll look elsewhere." The young man hurriedly called out to Xiao Qing, "Have you really met someone who looks exactly like me? Is his name Fu Jingxian? If you've met him, can you tell me that my younger brother is missing?" Xiao Qing was about to leave, but she stopped in her tracks. "You're saying that you have a younger brother called Fu Jingxian who looks exactly like you?" The young man called Fu Jingma nodded. "Yes, I've been looking for him for a long time." Xiao Qing thought for a moment and said, "Is he about 17 or 18 years old? Does he have a crescent-shaped birthmark on his waist?" Fu Jingma hurriedly said, "Yes, it's him. Do you know where he is?" Xiao Qing shook her head. "There was an accident some time ago and he went missing. I'm also looking for him." Chapter 198. Xiao Qing didn't know if it was her imagination, but Fu Jingma seemed to heave a sigh of relief. He smiled gently and said in a low voice, "I finally heard news about my brother again. Although it's not very good news, I feel much more at ease." Xiao Qing was silent for a moment and then asked, "Do you want to leave with me? When I find him, you can reunite." Fu Jingma grabbed the curtain and said carefully, "Can I leave with you?" His eyes were very beautiful, and the shape was exactly the same as Dai's. Xiao Qing couldn't help but think of Dai's pair of eyes that were especially dark and shiny when he looked at her. "Yes." Xiao Qing nodded. Yin Qiue immediately climbed up. He was almost hanging on Xiao Qing's body and then looked at Fu Jingma with a smile. "Since Qing has spoken, you should pack your things. Fu Jingma's face was slightly red and he said embarrassedly, I don't have anything to pack. Then come with me. Xiaoqing calmly pulled Yin Qiyu away from her body and glanced at him. Stand properly. Why are your bones so soft? Yin Qiyu pouted, feeling wronged. Then, she reluctantly straightened her body. If an ordinary man pouted like that, it would definitely make others feel very feminine, or even disgusting. However, Yin Qiyu didn't. He raised his eyebrows and curved his lips. Not to mention his actions, even his subtle expressions were a little seductive. He simply made people feel that he was the reincarnation of a vixen. Gu Panpan secretly complained. Kai Yingying's heart ached when she saw how flirtatious he was. Fu Jingma indeed didn't have anything to pack. He just packed a small bag and carried it on his back. He followed Xiaoqing. Kai Yingying and Li Pingcheng thanked them and the group left. After all, they were anxious to go back and embarrass the Japanese. Along the way, Fu Jingma didn't say much. He was very low-key and calm. After Gu Panpan and the rest compared him to Yin Qiyu, they also had a faint good impression of Fu Jingma. They returned at the right time. When they reached the main gate of Kyoto, they coincidentally bumped into the small group of Japanese entering the city. The leader was a young man in a white kimono. His eyes were gentle, and his facial features were not outstanding. However, his temperament made him stand out from the crowd. This should be the successor of the Onmyoji, the representative of Japan's envoy group. Behind the youth was a fierce-looking man in a samurai suit, with his hair tied up in a bun. He had a samurai sword on his waist, and his steps were steady. He was probably a martial artist before the apocalypse. In the entire emissary group, Xiaoqing only remembered these two people. The one with the bun and the samurai uniform was still all right. He was just a beginner level 4 warrior. Xiaoqing definitely had no problem dealing with him. However, the Onmyoji was more difficult to deal with. Xiaoqing felt a sense of danger from him. Although Japan was a small country, the Onmyoji was not easy to deal with. After all, he was the strongest person in his country. If he was too weak, it would be unreal. Xiaoqing and the rest were at the entrance. They watched the group of people enter the city before entering the city. The ones who welcomed them were the leader of the base's own group of paranormals and a few higher-ups. Xiaoqing looked at them from afar and went back with Kai Yingying and the rest. Fu Jingma was a person who knew how to reduce his presence. After Xiaoqing and the rest went back, they asked Fu Jingma to find a room to stay in. Fu Jingma also knew that Xiaoqing and the rest wanted to chat, so he left. Kai Yingying was also called away. Only Xiaoqing and her friends were left. Yin Qiyu immediately asked in confusion, "Why did you bring him back?" Chapter 199. Yin Qiyue's intuition was very accurate. He could clearly distinguish between good and bad intentions. Therefore, those hypocrites could never hide from him. Fu Jingma looked very docile, but Yin Qiyu instinctively disliked him. Xiaoqing explained seriously, "He is very likely to be Air Dai's brother. I don't want Air Dai's relatives to be stranded outside. Let's treat it as a surprise for Air Dai. When Air Dai is found, let them reunite. If not, it's fine. We can wait for Air Dai to come back and confirm it. If not, we can just send him away with a sum of crystals." Yin Qiyu nodded. Then, he immersed himself in discussing with Xiaoqing the route to find Air Dai. After the envoys from the island nation left, they would also set off. They would follow the planned route and head north to look for Air Dai. When Kai Yingying came back, it was already dinner time. She also brought back a piece of news. There will be a friendly match tomorrow. The group of Japanese paranormals wants to compare notes with us. Each side will send 6 people. This afternoon, several large mercenary groups almost broke their heads to fight for these 6 places. My father didn't get it, but we can all go and watch. It's good to be able to watch, Xiaoqing said as she went downstairs. She guessed that 2 spots would be given to the base, and the remaining 4 would be given to the 4 large mercenary groups. How could there be any left for Kai Yingying and the rest? When Xiaoqing went downstairs, she saw Fu Jingma wearing a pink apron. He was putting food on the table. When he saw Xiaoqing and the rest coming down, he lowered his head shyly. "You don't have to do all this," Xiaoqing said calmly. The young man intertwined his fingers and said embarrassedly, I have already caused trouble for everyone by following you. How can I not do anything? Besides, I have nothing to do. If I don't do anything, I will feel anxious. Gu Panpan liked this kind of humble and low-key person. Most importantly, he was not like Yin Chiue. She quickly said, You don't have to do all this. Just rest. Our leader is a very good person. We don't ask for anything in return. Fu Jingma quickly shook his head and said softly, Sister Panpan, doing such a small thing is not tiring at all. You don't have to do so next time. Xiao Qing helped Little Bun settle down and said, Let's eat. I will make a pot of soup and be back soon. She was now used to making a pot of soup every morning and night. Not only was it nourishing Yin Chiue's stomach, but it was also nourishing the bodies of others. She made different kinds of soup every day. When she came back, she saw Fu Jingma sitting at the bottom. He looked very restrained. Xiao Qing did not say anything. She did not plan to let Fu Jingma integrate into her small group in a short period of time. Everything depended on Air Dai. If Fu Jingma was really Air Dai's brother, everything would be fine. She did not mind taking care of one more person. If Fu Jingma was not, she did not need to cultivate any feelings for him. She could just send him away. Moreover, men were supposed to be more free and easy. Xiao Qing wasn't his father or mother, so how could she teach him a lesson? After dinner, the group gathered in the hall for a while. They drank some water and chatted. Kai Yingying left early, leaving Xiao Qing and Yin Hanqing to fight in the courtyard. This process did not refer to the fight between ability users. It was a physical fight. Although Yin Hanqing could not defeat Xiao Qing, he did not lose to Xiao Qing in terms of physical strength. After all, Yin Hanqing used to be the soldier king of his generation and was known as the Manchurian tiger in the 3 major military regions. After becoming a paranormal, his physical fitness had improved a lot. The two of them fought in the yard for half an hour without risking their lives, but it was still a draw. The others were watching with great interest at the door. Fu Jingma could not help but ask, Sister Qing and Brother Qing have trained before? They are very good. Gu Panpan munched on melon seeds as she gossiped with Fu Jingma. Sister Qing and Brother Qing were both from the Special Forces. Although they have retired from the military, their skills are definitely top-notch. And this isn't the real thing. Yin Chiue could not help but roll his eyes at Gu Panpan. You talk too much. He was not willing to listen to Fu Jingma ask about Xiao Qing. Gu Panpan and Yin Chiue did not get along. The two of them were born to be at odds. Every time they met, they would quarrel. You are a trap. How dare you talk about me like that? Every time this happened, Gu Panpan hated her brother. She was angry that he did not fight for her. Look, let's not talk about Yin Chiue. She pestered Xiao Qing every day. Even Yin Hanqing, that honest person, would silently make supper for Xiao Qing and fight with Xiao Qing. Only her brother. He did not know how to talk nonsense. He kept his thoughts to himself and kept them to himself. How could such a taciturn person get a girl? Even if he did not pester her like Yin Chiue, he should at least take action. Would a girl take the initiative to throw herself at him? Thinking about this, Gu Panpan gritted her teeth. When her brother could be more reliable and take the initiative, she would not have to worry about losing a bunch of hair every day and becoming bald. No, she was most worried that someone would take the initiative and turn her future sister-in-law into someone else's wife. If it was possible, Gu Panpan really wanted to take her brother's place and chase after Xiao Qing. The two of them were like children, scolding and berating each other. The more they argued, the more addicted they became. Thus, they completely did not notice that Fu Jingma had been quietly watching Xiao Qing from the side. The light in his eyes was getting more and more intense. If they found out, the two of them would definitely put aside their temporary hatred and work together against the enemy. On the other side, although Xiao Qing was not sweating, she was exceptionally refreshed. She flipped her hair and tightened her loose clothes. Then she said, Let's call it a day. Yin Hanqing subconsciously glanced at her closed collar. Chapter 200. Fu Jingma was very diligent and honest. He spent the whole day either cleaning up the house or doing some trivial things. Gu Panpan and the others had a better impression of him. After all, almost no one would hate someone who was diligent and good-looking. Soon, it was time for the friendly competition. The friendly competition was held in the big square of Jingdu. Although it was open to the public, it still required ability users to enter. The seats in the front row were reserved for the more powerful mercenary groups in Jingdu. Although Kaiying's mercenary group wasn't in the top few, it was still a relatively large mercenary group. Naturally, they could occupy a seat. Kaiying had brought Xiaoqing and the others early. Xiaoqing also met Kaiying's father for the first time. Kaiying's father looked very kind. He had a smile on his face when he met people. He was very likable. Moreover, when Kaiying's father talked to Xiaoqing and the others, he didn't put on airs. He didn't show any arrogance just because Xiaoqing's group was a nameless team of ability users. In short, he looked quite amiable. After a while, the other top-ranked mercenary groups arrived one after another. The most eye-catching group was naturally Thorns and Roses. They were all girls, and not a single one of them was ugly. The most eye-catching of all was their leader, Wu Jiaojiao. She was wearing a tight leather suit that accentuated her figure. She had a small waist and a beautiful face. Coupled with her sexy makeup, she attracted the attention of all the metahumans present. Naturally, Xiaoqing wasn't looking at the girls. Instead, she was looking at the man who was sitting in the corner. He looked quite handsome. His facial features weren't very prominent, but he was the type that was good-looking. The reason why he attracted Xiaoqing's attention was that he didn't have much of a presence. Even if he was sitting in a group and dozing off, he wouldn't attract too much attention. Xiaoqing took a second look. Perhaps he felt Xiaoqing's gaze, so he opened his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes, the man's whole face gave off a completely different feeling. Perhaps it was the finishing touch, but his face instantly became delicate and pretty, to the point where people couldn't take their eyes off him. Especially his eyes, which were sparkling and slightly squinted, with a faint smile on his face. Then, he met Xiaoqing's gaze. Xiaoqing sized him up very seriously, then looked away. The man was a little curious. He was very clear about his own appearance. Very few people could break away from his gaze so naturally when they looked at him in the eye. However, when Xiaoqing looked away, her eyes were full of the word boring, which made him a little discouraged. The Japanese and the higher-ups of the base came together. When the Japanese arrived, Xiaoqing almost jumped up because at the back of the Japanese team, there was a young girl in a cherry blossom kimono. Beside the young girl stood a young man with a long scar at the corner of his eye. Xiaoqing almost flew over and hugged the young man. She had searched for so long and worn out her iron shoes to no avail. However, Erdai appeared in front of her by himself. That was Erdai. Xiaoqing didn't need to ask or say anything. She could recognize at a glance that it was definitely Erdai. Yin Hanqing also saw Erdai. He grabbed Xiaoqing's hand and said in a low voice, "Don't be impulsive. Let's take a look first." Why was Erdai in the Japanese team? Xiaoqing suppressed the impulse in her heart and observed carefully. She found that Erdai's expression was very gloomy, with a faint sense of urgency and impatience. The scar at the corner of his eye was obviously not new, but it hadn't disappeared. More importantly, there was a chain around his wrist. The end of the chain was inside the kimono girl's wide sleeve. Chapter 201. Xiaoqing's heart was filled with killing intent. She was almost certain that Erdai was coerced. Don't be rash. Yin Hanqing felt Xiaoqing's killing intent and pressed down on her shoulder. Let's observe for a while more. Judging from the situation, Erdai is temporarily safe. Xiaoqing took a deep breath, suppressed the impulse in her heart, but kept looking at Erdai. Erdai also felt Xiaoqing's gaze. He turned his head, and when he saw Xiaoqing, his eyes were filled with surprise and grievance. After not seeing each other for such a long time, Erdai had also calmed down a lot. He did not immediately show his impulsiveness, but stood there quietly. He did not make any unnecessary movements, only using his eyes to express his unhappiness and longing. Xiaoqing could clearly see that his eyes were filled with longing, so much so that it was about to overflow. Xiaoqing's heart ached. Ever since they met, they had only separated twice. The first time, she had abandoned him. The second time, she had abandoned him in disguise. This time, when they met again, Xiaoqing would never let such a thing happen again. After the Japanese had taken their seats, the two sides had a friendly exchange. Xiaoqing could understand the Japanese language, but she did not care about the small talk. Her hearing was very sensitive. She could even hear the girl in the kimono asking dummy in broken Chinese, "Do you hate this kind of scene with so many people? It'll be over in a while. How about I take you around for a walk?" Air Dai ignored her and tilted his head to look at the ground. The girl was not discouraged and kept whispering in Air Dai's ear until a man beside her said, "Your Highness Aiz, it's time to take a seat." There were not many people who could be called Your Highness, and she was also a woman. Xiaoqing immediately thought of a person, Qiu Xiao Ai, the only daughter of the current emperor of the island. Why was she in the island's envoy group? Xiaoqing could not help but frown. If this woman was really Qiu Xiaoai, it would be troublesome for her to forcefully bring her back to Air Dai. The requirement of a friendly match was naturally to not kill anyone. After all, it was under the banner of friendship. Of course, it was very normal to not be able to hold back during the process. Therefore, even if someone died, the two sides would not pursue the murderer's responsibility. They didn't say it out loud, but everyone knew that the first one to appear was a short man from Japan with a big head. On the other side was the vice leader of the Frost mercenary group, one of the top paranormals in Kyoto. At the beginning of the fight, Frost's vice leader had suffered a few losses. The Japanese Esper was an earth elemental. He seemed to be a ninja who was good at combining earth elemental and martial arts. If it was a fight to the death, Frost's vice leader and the earth elemental would definitely be the one to die. However, during the competition, Frost's vice leader was at a disadvantage because he was not familiar with the ninja's tactics. Unfortunately, he lost. When he lost, not only himself, but all the paranormals in Kyoto felt embarrassed. After all, this was the first round, and they lost to Japan. How embarrassing was it to lose at the beginning of the competition? Before the second round started, Wu Jiaojiao stood up and said, "I'll go this round." She had a bad temper. Without saying anything, she rolled up her sleeves and went up. As soon as Wu Jiaojiao went up, the paranormals below started cheering and whistling. Although Wu Jiaojiao had a bad temper, she was not a fire elemental. She was a water elemental. At first, people thought that water elemental paranormals were useless. Could you throw a water ball to kill a zombie? Later, the water source was gradually polluted, and the water that could be drunk directly became less and less. Water elemental paranormals became precious because they were like living water purifiers. People could go without food for a few days, but they could not go without water for a few days. Judging from the size, the two halves were of the same size. Blood and internal organs flowed all over the floor. The girl with the bun probably did it on purpose to make the scene so bloody as revenge for Wu Jiaojiao's attack. His arrival infuriated the other commanders, especially the commander of Mad Demon. After all, he had lost one of his experts. Without a second thought, he jumped up and wanted to take revenge. However, he was pulled back because they had discussed it very clearly at that time. 2 of the spots belonged to the base, and the remaining spots would be given to each of the 4 mercenary groups. The few of them looked at the drowsy man in the corner. He was the only one left among the 4 mercenary groups who had not made a move. The man was still dozing off, but he almost shivered when he was stared at by the group of people. He rubbed his eyes, stretched, and stood in front of them. "Is it my turn?" A few people dragged the bloody corpse past him. Only then did he sniff and wake up a little. He glanced around and asked, "It's my turn, right?" Chapter 203. The few of them nodded helplessly. The man asked, "Who's going to fight me?" The man with the bun raised his head proudly and stabbed the bloody katana into the ground. "I'll continue. No problem." His words were clear. It was no problem for him to deal with several people by himself. This was simply showing off. The man was not angry. He blinked and said, "Then can we start now?" The man with the bun nodded. The man immediately raised his hand, and 6 arm-length short knives immediately flew towards the man with the bun. As soon as the short knives flew over, the man with the bun vigilantly erected a fire shield for himself and prepared to block. However, the 6 knives stabbed into the ground beside his feet, forming an irregular hexagon. The man with the bun couldn't help but laugh. Wasn't this person's control too bad? How did he become the representative of the Celestial Empire? Was there no one else in the Celestial Empire? Without waiting for him to finish laughing, the man suddenly pressed his palm down. The rumbling sound of the explosion was almost deafening. Broken soil splattered everywhere, and half of an arm with a katana fell on the table in front of the Japanese representative. After the explosion stopped, the place where the man with the bun was originally standing had turned into a huge pit. Beside the pit were pieces of limbs that were scattered all over the place. If the vice captain of Mad Demon had died miserably, then this man with the bun was a tragic sight. At least the vice captain of Mad Demon had an intact corpse. Even if he was cut in half, he could still bury them together. What about the one in front of him? He couldn't even bury them together. The man brushed his bangs and said perfunctorily, "I thought he was very powerful, so I used more strength. Who would have thought that he wouldn't be able to withstand the first move? This has nothing to do with me." The man with the bun had only been pretending for 2 minutes before his face was slapped back. Moreover, his entire body was smashed into pieces. More importantly, the man stood there and didn't intend to go down. "Then, one more of you can come up. I think that with this level, I can take on the entire field alone." Kai Ying laughed from below. "He's too proud of us. He has to slap our faces like this, as expected of the leader of the Dark Thorn. I've decided. In the future, my Prince Charming will be Zhu Machin, and my goddess will be Wu Jiaojiao." In the end, the man called Zhu Machin was unable to continue slapping his face because he was dragged away by his vice-captain. The Onmyoji sitting at the very front unfolded his clothes and said humbly, "It's said that the Celestial Empire is vast and full of talents. It really lives up to its reputation. I'll take on the remaining 2 matches. Being able to spar with a few experts makes this trip worth it." Naturally, no one would say anything if he wanted to take on 2 matches. This was his ability. If he didn't have the ability and dared to say such big words, he could only be slapped in the face. A young man walked out from the higher-ups of the base and got into position to spar with the Onmyoji. The 2 of them exchanged names, and Xiaoqing learned that the Onmyoji was called Abe Shizuke. He was wearing a kimono and didn't carry any weapons. He only had a fan in his hand, which had words that even Xiaoqing couldn't understand. He stood in the middle of the field, and his aura was very calm. However, the paranormals on the base could not help but feel nervous. There were already thin energy fluctuations emanating from his body. However, in comparison, he was not as good as Abe Shigeki. Is he related to Abe Saimai? Gu Panpan bit her finger and asked in a low voice. If one were to ask about Japan's Onmyoji, the most famous one would definitely be Abe Saimai. Abe Shizuke just happened to have the same surname as Abe Saimai, which made Gu Panpan curious. Abe Saimai's branch of the Onmyoji lineage had a gap and directly died out. The last Onmyoji of the Abe family had a female disciple. After the Abe family's bloodline died out, she gave birth to a child with her husband and let the child take on the surname Abe. Abe Shizuke should belong to this branch. Xiaoqing explained seriously. However, Gu Panpan would probably treat it as gossip. If it weren't for the arrival of the apocalypse and the appearance of zombies, paranormals, and those mutated animals and plants, Gu Panpan would definitely think that the Onmyoji were also a legendary existence. The Onmyoji called Abe Shizuke bowed politely and began to move. When he moved, it was impossible to tell what kind of paranormal he was. This was because no matter if the paranormals on the base released fire blades or fireballs, he would use the fan in his hand to easily block them. His other hand was always behind his back. This kind of attitude was really too arrogant. The paranormals gradually became angry. He pushed Abe Shizuke away with a ring of fire. Then, he used nearly 3 seconds to condense his power. Finally, a ring of red light suddenly appeared under Abe Shizuke's feet. Scorching flames erupted like a volcano and drowned Abe Shizuke. The moment Shiroyuki Abe was submerged, Many people breathed a sigh of relief. However, Xiaoqing's heart skipped a beat because she saw the space behind the esper from the base suddenly fluctuate, and then a figure appeared. This figure was none other than Abe Shizuke, who had just been submerged. He raised his folding fan, and 3 green lights formed a diamond-shaped light blade and stabbed towards the paranormal's back. This was clearly a wind blade. Teleportation should belong to the space element, and wind blade should belong to the wind element. Could it be that he was a dual-element paranormals? Xiaoqing could be considered a dual-element paranormals now. In addition to the wood element that she completely controlled, Xiaoqing also comprehended some space abilities. Although she was still not proficient in using space, she only lacked time. If she was allowed to become a dual-element paranormals, why couldn't others be allowed to do the same? However, Abe Shizuke quickly changed her view because the paranormals from the base weren't weak. After sensing the killing intent, he rolled forward and dodged the wind blade. At this time, Abe Shizuke stretched out his hand and a vine drilled out from the ground, trying to bind the paranormal's ankles. Triple element. Chapter 204. Vine, Fireball, Earth Shield. Shizuyuki Abe used 5 different abilities in succession, which made the jaws of the onlookers drop to the ground. How to describe it? For an ordinary person to become an ability user, it was already a great fortune, but Shizuyuki Abe actually had 5 different abilities. This discovery made the paranormal from the base a little flustered. He had a preconceived notion that he would lose. In the end, he was knocked out of the field by Shiroyuki Abe's folding fan. Although Shiroyuki Abe's movements were very elegant, when the paranormal left the field, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale. His internal organs were injured. If he didn't take a good rest, it would be a big hindrance to his future promotion. More importantly, after this paranormal left the field, the base couldn't send out a second person to compete with Shiroyuki Abe. It wasn't that there was no one in the base, but that no one thought that they could beat the paranormal who lost. If they lost this last round, they would lose a lot of face in this friendly competition. However, in this situation, no one dared to say that they could beat Abe Shizuke. He had already displayed 5 types of abilities. Looking at how skillful he was, who knew if he still had other tricks up his sleeves? The field suddenly fell into a deadlock. Some people were eager to try, but no one dared to stand out and try. A few of the stronger paranormal, such as Wu Jiaojiao, had already fought before. If they fought again, wouldn't people say that there was no one in the Celestial Empire? Xiaoqing sat quietly. She had the urge to go down and try, but she didn't want to expose herself. Although strength could be used as a deterrent, she didn't have any great power, so there was no need for that. Now, the biggest problem Xiaoqing was facing was actually Air Dai. Instead of showing off, it was better to think about how to rescue Air Dai without anyone knowing. In fact, she had another choice, which was to ambush Shiroyuki Abe and Shiroyuki Abe when they left Kyoto and rescue Air Dai by force. However, a long delay could lead to many problems. Xiaoqing was afraid that something would happen during this period. She didn't want to see any damage to Air Dai, so it was better to save Air Dai as soon as possible. Xiaoqing gritted her teeth and suddenly stood up. She spoke in fluent Japanese. "Mr. Amayoji, I would like to experience your ability. But before that, I have something to discuss with you." When she stood up, Xiaoqing had already made up her mind. The worst-case scenario was that she would forcefully take Air Dai away. If anyone tried to stop them, it would definitely be the Japanese. Killing them would not be a pity. Instead, it would be quite satisfying. The worst thing she could do was to launch a zombie siege. So what if she had to go against the entire human race? As long as the people she cared about were fine, that was enough. "May I know what this beautiful young lady wants to discuss with me?" Abe Shizuke elegantly listened to her. Xiaoqing pointed at Air Dai and said, "The young man over there is my relative. He was accidentally lost. I don't know what happened to him. He will be in your team. I hope you can bring him back." Xiao Xiao and Izzy said without thinking, "That's not possible." But soon, she seemed to think of something. After all, such a decisive refusal, and the other party was Air Dai's relative, sounded a little unreasonable. It was not an enemy, but a relative who wanted to reunite with Air Dai. Wasn't it cold-blooded for her to refuse? Qiu Xiaoizi bit her lower lip and couldn't help but look at Erdai. Erdai didn't look to the side or the ground as usual. Instead, he looked at Xiaoqing with a warm and gentle gaze that she had never seen before. Chapter 205. At that moment, Qiu Xiaoizi knew that what Xiaoqing said was true. Qiu Xiaoizi's nose twitched, and she felt a little sad. The first time she saw Erdai, she sneaked out and encountered a mutant beast. Erdai happened to pass by. He was in a hurry to run south, but when he saw the group of mutant beasts, he turned around. He was a little injured in the midst of a group of mutant beasts. He looked very fierce. Qiu Xiaoizi felt that she was like a princess who had been saved by a hero. Her heart was full of indescribable feelings. Of course, that was because Qiu Xiaoizi didn't know that Erdai just wanted to get some high-grade crystals and bring them back to Xiaoqing. Later, Abe and Shizuyuki came. There was a communication barrier between the two sides, and Erdai was hot-tempered. As a result, there was a conflict. Erdai certainly couldn't beat so many paranormals. Besides, he had a lot of secrets that he couldn't show to others. Therefore, Erdai was caught. Naturally, Qiu Xiaoizi was reluctant to let Erdai become a prisoner. In her heart, Erdai was the hero who saved her. However, Erdai went crazy once and tried to leave several times, so she had to trap Erdai. Now, the person that Erdai really cared about was here. She wanted to trap Erdai, but she had no excuse. Even so, Qiu Xiaoizi still didn't want to hand over Erdai so easily. She pretended to be spoiled and said, "If you can defeat Shizuyuki, then I will give him to you. If you lose, I won't give him to you." Xiaoqing's original plan was to avoid using force as much as possible, but with the situation in front of her, it was impossible not to use force. She calmly said, "Then please enlighten me, young master." Xiaoqing's approach was actually very abrupt. After all, the people present were all famous paranormals in Kyoto, and she was not famous at all. Speaking of which, she was not qualified to stand up or even speak. Therefore, a few superpowered people who thought they were smart immediately stood up to stop her. If you're not capable enough, don't come out and embarrass yourself. This is not your home. Xiaoqing didn't even look at them and walked straight ahead. The paranormals didn't even have a chance to fight back. They only felt as if they were pushed away by an invisible hand. They couldn't even get close to Xiaoqing. The other people who had objections also stopped talking at this moment. The higher-ups looked at each other and finally acquiesced. Anyway, no one stood out now, and Xiaoqing seemed to have some ability. More importantly, Xiaoqing was just a nobody. Even if she lost, it wouldn't be too embarrassing. Xiaoqing stood in the middle of the field. The two of them faced each other, and the atmosphere was completely different. If Abe Shizuyuki gave people the feeling of a harmonious spring breeze with hidden killing intent, then Xiaoqing was a pool of still water. She looked calm without waves, but no one knew what kind of undercurrent was surging underneath. The two of them stood in the middle and didn't immediately start fighting. Instead, they chatted for a while. The first to speak was Abe Shizuyuki. He suddenly said, "In your language, miss, you look very familiar. Have we met before?" Xiaoqing shook her head. "Probably because I look more ordinary. I haven't met a young master before. I like opponents like you, miss. This one is Abe Shizuyuki." Abe Shizuyuki introduced himself very seriously. "Currently, I'm the current Shushin Gong Guardian." The Shushin Gong was Abe Saimai's ancestral temple. The previous Shushin Gong must have been a Japanese astronomer who was best at divination. The astronomer here wasn't a degree, but a special existence in Japan. It was a very important position in the Inyang Liao. Abe Shizuyuki didn't mention his position, but his inheritance. This showed that he actually valued Xiaoqing very much. Chapter 206. Although Xiaoqing didn't have much contact with it, she had heard of it. Just like there were Onmyoji warriors in Japan, there were also ancient martial arts passed down from generation to generation in the Celestial Empire. Although it wasn't as powerful as in novels and TV shows, it was far superior to things like Muay Thai, Sanda, and Judo. She was afraid that Abe Shizuka would misunderstand her as a descendant of ancient martial arts. Xiaoqing wasn't prepared to explain. She said lightly, "Xiaoqing." Then she was ready to attack. Even in front of so many people, she wasn't going to hold back anymore, because nothing was more important than air dye. She had to win this battle. "Please." Abe Shizuka still stretched out his hand politely, and his wide sleeves hung down naturally. Suddenly, a breeze blew, and his sleeves moved slightly. It wasn't the wind, but Xiaoqing's vines broke out of the ground, causing the air to flow. Countless vines were like sharp spears, stabbing at the soles of Abe Shizuka's feet. He stroked his hand down, and flames spewed out. Xiaoqing's vines weren't afraid of fire, but Abe Shizuka's flames still blocked the vines for a moment. At this moment, Abe Shizuka used the recoil force to temporarily float in the air for a moment. In the next second, countless air currents carried him away from the vines, soaring into the sky. Xiaoqing had already appeared beside Abe Shizuka at this time, and a solid punch landed on Abe Shizuka's body. A layer of water suddenly appeared on Abe Shizuka's body. The power of the water circle was very soft, but it pushed Xiaoqing nearly a meter away, and the distance between them immediately increased. But when Xiaoqing and Abe Shizuka's water circle came into contact, she felt that something was wrong. The feeling that the water circle gave her wasn't like a pure water ability. With this doubt, Xiaoqing commanded the vines to harass Abe Shizuka, and she once again launched an attack on Abe Shizuka's body. Several times in a row, she deliberately used her body to block Abe Shizuka's attacks. In the eyes of outsiders, it looked like she was being attacked continuously and was about to lose, but she was very happy. This was because she had discovered Shiroyuki Abe's secret. Shiroyuki Abe was not a multi-elemental esper. After all, having 2 elemental espers was already very powerful, and having 3 elemental espers was even more heaven-defying. Xiaoqing first noticed that all of Abe Shizuka's ability attacks had similar energy fluctuations. Although the water ability was no different from the general water ability, it didn't have the unique characteristics of water. To put it simply, his special ability was only on the surface, but it did not have the most important part, such as the heat of the flames and the vitality of the wood element. In that case, Shiroyuki Abe should have a special ability to assimilate her own energy into various types of abilities. After discovering this, Xiaoqing was very steady. She fought steadily, harassing with vines while constantly releasing daughter seeds. The daughter seeds were all attached to the surface of Abe Shizuka's body. They didn't penetrate deeply, and then silently absorbed his energy. Abilities weren't endless. Sooner or later, they would be exhausted. Xiaoqing had brought this time forward. To be honest, Xiaoqing's various abilities were more suitable for chaotic situations. She would be at a disadvantage if she fought alone. However, Xiaoqing was extremely calm. She continuously probed Abe Shizuka, and then discovered that Abe Shizuka's ability wasn't very destructive. At least compared to Zhu Machen's metal that could explode, or her poisonous vines with thorns, it was a bit less destructive. Of course, the most important thing was that Xiaoqing wanted to analyze Abe Shizuka's weakness. She continuously fought, and only used her vines to harass Abe Shizuka and observe his condition. After all, it was really embarrassing to be slapped in the face by a Japanese. As a result, the situation in the second half of the battle suddenly changed. Xiaoqing began to chase after Abe Shizuku. At this time, the two of them were in a very sorry state. After all, Xiaoqing's body was very strong, but her clothes were still ordinary clothes. Her clothes were torn, faintly revealing pieces of white skin. Abe Shizuku was also in a very sorry state, and the corner of his mouth was bruised. Then, Shiroyuki Abe became angry. He had never been forced to such a state before. Shiroyuki Abe's hands formed a complicated seal, and suddenly, a huge earth-colored snake rose from the bottom of his feet. The earth python looked to be more than 2 meters tall, and Shiroyuki Abe stood on its head. However, the bottom of his feet was supported by wind energy, so he didn't land on solid ground. When he used this move, many people began to cry out in surprise. To be able to condense earth energy into such a huge python, and it was so lifelike, as if it was a living creature, it should be at least level 4, right? Xiaoqing frowned slightly. With a wave of her hand, a huge dragon made entirely of vines rose into the air and lifted her up. The two of them stood on the head of the python and rode on the dragon. Just looking at the scene, it was more shocking than the previous metahumans. Shiroyuki Abe pointed with his finger, and the python under his feet roared and rushed towards Xiaoqing. The dragon under Xiaoqing's feet also rushed forward, unwilling to be left behind. The earth python and the wood dragon intertwined in the air. You twist my tail, I wrap around your neck. It looked like they were evenly matched. As long as one side suddenly lost, that person would lose. Shiroyuki Abe also understood this logic. He folded his hands in his sleeves and looked at the dragon and snake with a cold gaze. His face was already pale because of the overdraft of his ability. Soon, his face became even paler because Xiaoqing didn't just watch. She jumped up and landed on the python's head like a rock. With a punch, a crack immediately appeared on the python's head. After a few punches, the python's head caved in. If this continued, his python would die. No one had forced him to this point. Shiroyuki Abe quietly formed a second seal. In the entire island, he was also one of the top metahumans. It wasn't because his ability was outstanding. On the contrary, his ability was remote and not outstanding. It was a simulation. However, Shiroyuki Abe was the first person to combine yin-yang technique and his ability. After he chanted a few strange syllables, the earth python suddenly straightened its head. Starting from the top, it instantly turned dark green. Even the scales on its body became lifelike. In the next second, the giant python opened its bloody mouth and bit the wood dragon's head. Then, it swung its head and slammed Xiaoqing to the ground. How hard was Xiaoqing's body? She smashed a big hole in the ground. If an ordinary metahuman was in such a situation, not to mention broken bones, at least they wouldn't be able to get up. Many people were very nervous. They looked at the big hole and soon saw Xiaoqing climb out. Yes, she crawled out. Her clothes were ragged and her hair was covered in dirt. She looked a little ridiculous, but no one laughed out loud because Xiaoqing stood up. Her left elbow was fractured, and the broken bone had pierced through her skin and flesh, exposing her arm. Xiaoqing used her right hand to hold her left hand. With a fierce twist, her arm was righted. There wasn't even a trace of pain on her face. She calmly looked at Shiroyuki Abe and the big snake. She said that she wouldn't hold back this time. Chapter 208. No matter how strong Abe Shizuyuki was, after fighting for more than an hour, his power was almost exhausted. Besides, the intensity of the battle between the two of them was especially high. Xiaoqing moved her hands and feet, and the broken parts began to slowly heal. Only then did she walk forward. At this moment, in Abe Shizuyuki's eyes, Xiaoqing's eyes seemed to be emitting a silver-white light. It was very weak, but it was impossible to ignore. Abe Shizuyuki took a deep breath and pointed forward again. The silver-white, lifelike snake rushed out. The vines that soared into the sky immediately wrapped around the snake. Naturally, no one saw the black cracks between the vines. The vines entangled and twisted, and the snake turned into a pile of dirt. Abe Shizuyuki was stunned. He didn't expect the snake to be so weak. While he was in a daze, a spatial crack quietly appeared behind him. It quickly cut open a wound and then disappeared. If it was just that, it wouldn't be much. However, Abe Shizuyuki felt something enter the wound and grow unscrupulously in his body. Abe Shizuyuki instantly broke out in cold sweat. He used all his power to suppress the daughter in his body. Xiaoqing walked over step by step. Abe Shizuyuki knew that he had lost. If he wanted to fight, he wouldn't be able to suppress the daughter and would die. However, all his power was used to suppress the daughter. How could he block Xiaoqing's attack? I admit defeat. As soon as Abe Shizuyuki's voice fell, he felt the crazily growing thing in his body wither and shrink in an instant. Then, it couldn't be found. Xiaoqing wiped the dust off her face. She looked past Abe Shizuyuki and looked at Air Dai. Her eyes were filled with gentleness as she walked over. Air Dai pounced over without saying a word, but there was a long chain locking him up. Xiao Qing's eyes flashed with a cold light. Without saying a word, she grabbed the chain. Her palms surged with the power of space and directly cut the chain. Air Dai smoothly threw himself into her arms and didn't go out. He had a lot of grievances and thoughts that he wanted to tell Xiao Qing, but he couldn't. The only way to express his feelings was to hug Xiao Qing tightly. Xiao Qing had been feeling very frustrated these days, but at this moment, she was completely relaxed. Xiao Qing didn't say a word and carried Air Dai back. She didn't even look at those island people, and naturally, she didn't notice the jealousy in Xiao Zhao's eyes. Yin Hanqing and the others had been waiting for a long time. When they saw Air Dai, they felt very happy. After all, they were a team, and Air Dai was also an important member of them. When Air Dai came back, the feeling of missing something was gone. To be honest, this battle wasn't as exciting as the previous few battles. Moreover, it had lasted for a long time, but no one was sleepy. Everyone's eyes were wide open, afraid that they would miss something. Xiao Qing didn't have any reputation in the capital. Of course, that was in the past. After today, she would definitely be included in the list of experts in the capital. Xiao Qing wasn't someone who liked to be in the limelight. As soon as she returned to her seat, she said to Kai Ying, "We're really leaving this time. Let's meet again if we have the chance." Kai Ying was also very desperate now. She carefully compared and found that in terms of appearance, she was not as good as Xiao Qing. In terms of strength, she was not as good as Xiao Qing. In terms of background, her father was a little more powerful, but he was not as powerful as Xiao Qing. More importantly, Yin Chiyue had never looked at her. The girl was also a bit tactful. She immediately suppressed the sadness in her heart and nodded. She also helped to stop Kai Ying's father, who wanted to talk to Xiao Qing in detail. Xiao Qing quietly slipped away with her people. If she didn't leave now, would she wait for this friendship competition to end and then be taken over by others? Chapter 210. Fu Jingma, on the other hand, was not afraid at all. He was very calm. Xiao Qing stroked Air Dai's head. When she looked at Fu Jingma again, her eyes were filled with malice. "Is it okay to be eaten up?" Fu Jingma bit his lower lip tightly. His voice was a little nervous and hoarse, but he said very firmly, "If my younger brother needs it, it's okay to do anything." Air Dai slowly inched closer to Fu Jingma. Fu Jingma could even feel Air Dai's cold breath on his neck. That area of skin gave him goosebumps. Fu Jingma gritted his teeth and did not move. When Air Dai was almost touching him, Xiao Qing hugged Air Dai and said calmly, "Since you are Air Dai's older brother, and now that you know this big secret, you can't leave even if you want to. Remember, if you want to escape and tell everyone what you saw today, I will kill you before you can say anything." In order to prevent Fu Jingma from revealing Air Dai's secret, Xiao Qing even planted a daughter seed in him. Even if he was Air Dai's older brother, she still had to be cautious. She had to leave a way out for herself. She would wait until she could really trust Fu Jingma after interacting with him for a long time. Only then would she remove the seed in his body. Fu Jingma did not say anything. He just stood up silently and patted the dust off his body. Then, he asked softly, "Can I stay with my younger brother at night? We haven't seen each other for a long time. I want to be closer to him." Air Dai immediately hugged Xiao Qing's neck tightly and glared fiercely at Fu Jingma. He did not like Fu Jingma, and he hated even more that Fu Jingma actually wanted to separate him and Xiao Qing. As for brothers, could he eat them? He only wanted Xiao Qing, and that was enough. Moreover, Dummy was rejecting Fu Jingma from the bottom of his heart. He didn't like him, and he hated Fu Jingma getting close to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing comforted Air Dai and said, "Air Dai doesn't know you now. If you two stay together and Air Dai goes crazy, you won't be able to handle it. So, let's wait until Air Dai is willing to acknowledge you." Fu Jingma looked down, seemingly a little disappointed. Xiao Qing brought Air Dai, who was like an octopus, to the place where Yin Hanqing was cooking. The table was already set up in the other side. Probably because he had been away from Xiaoqing for too long, Erdai was even more clingy to Xiaoqing than before. He could not wait to occupy Xiaoqing's body all the time. His behavior provoked many people, especially Yin Qiue. If he had not been suppressing his anger and jealousy, he would have already pounced on Xiaoqing and occupied the other half of her body. Even though he was suppressing it, when Yin Qiue sat at the side, he kept looking at Xiaoqing and a certain part of her body with hidden bitterness. Yin Qiue actually had a personality flaw. If he was allowed to develop, it was very likely that he would become the final boss of the story, just like in some novels. Hence, Xiaoqing could be considered to have gotten rid of the evil in advance. However, even though Yin Qiue's personality had been restrained because of Xiaoqing, he was still a very extreme person. For example, now, when he looked at Xiaoqing and Erdai, he began to think of two ways to deal with them. He could either find a way to turn Xiaoqing into a normal person, or he could find a way to turn him into the same kind of person as Xiaoqing. In short, when he saw that Erdai, as the same kind of person as Xiaoqing, was able to receive so much care from Xiaoqing, he wanted to bite the corner of the blanket and cry for a while. Ever since he found Erdai, Xiaoqing did not look at him again. A great enemy. Xiaoqing comforted Erdai for a long time before suddenly asking Yin Qiue, "Can you think of a way to make food that zombies can eat?" Chapter 211. She, Little Bun, and Erdai were all similar to zombies. Little Bun was better. He could absorb food like milk, but she and Erdai vomited everything they ate. "Let me try." Yin Qiue was excited for a second, and then she said in a reserved manner, "Zombies absorb energy from flesh and crystals to maintain their lives and upgrade. I will study more on crystals and the flesh of mutant animals and see if I can make something." Xiaoqing nodded. At this time, Yin Hanqing had already prepared lunch. Fu Jingma took the initiative to help and put the dishes on the table. The group was ready to eat. Fu Jingma didn't think so in the past. After all, Xiaoqing had always been eating because Kai Yingying and the others were by her side. She would vomit after the deed was done. Now that there were no outsiders by her side, Xiaoqing didn't even eat. The more Fu Jingma thought about it, the more frightened he became. Was Xiaoqing also a zombie? But even if zombies were different, at most, they would be like Erdai, right? Their IQ was like a child's, and they couldn't speak. If Xiaoqing was also a zombie, then it was too scary. Thinking of this, Fu Jingma threw this idea to the back of his mind. During lunch, Xiaoqing and the others were discussing, should we go back to the S-City survivor base first? Or should we go to Jiangbei to report that we are safe? We can go to Jiangbei to report that we are safe. Let's go back to S-City. We haven't been back for so long, and it won't be good if the turtle dove occupies the magpie's nest, Gu Pan said while biting her chopsticks. She had encountered this before when she went on a mission with her brother. After fighting outside for more than half a month, they came back and found that their house had been occupied. This kind of situation was common in the base. Most of the time, a group of paranormals would go out together and come back to divide the spoils of war of the dead paranormals. Some paranormals with bad character would even go to the houses of the dead paranormals and loot them clean. Taking other people's wives and daughters had happened before. From this, it could be seen that it was a wise choice to find a group of reliable teammates. Although the base had tacitly agreed that those people could plunder the property of the dead paranormals, there were still many people who wanted to plunder the property of those who were still alive and hadn't returned for a long time. If Xiaoqing and the others were unlucky, it was very likely that they would encounter such people. This was also the reason why many paranormal teams liked to leave one person at home to guard when they were out on a mission. When Xiaoqing left, she took away most of the important things, such as the crystal stones that she had saved. However, there were still a lot of food that was not easy to bring out, so she stored them at home. If they were plundered, it would be infuriating. They were full of worries when they came, but now that they were all gone, their moods were naturally much better. The group of people walked back as if they were on a scenic tour. Occasionally, they would go out to hunt for wild animals for a sumptuous meal. At this time, it was rare to see animals that were not mutated. After all, nature was a very cruel place. Survival of the fittest was the law of the jungle. Those animals that were not mutated had been hunted and eaten in the early days of the doomsday, or were eaten by natural enemies. Some of the lucky survivors were gradually eliminated because of their weak physique. Now, almost all of the remaining animals were mutated. Mutation was a disaster for humans, but for animals, it was a carnival. Mutant animals of the same level could crush zombies, and in terms of strength, they could also crush paranormals of the same level. However, the intelligence of humans was beyond the reach of animals. Therefore, when paranormals of the same level fought with mutant animals, the outcome was not certain. What was even more terrible was that the evolution speed of mutated animals was faster than that of humans. Even zombies' evolution speed was a little faster than humans. There were 3 ways for human paranormals to evolve. The first was to exercise by themselves, which was the slowest way. The second was to absorb crystal stones, which was the most common way. The third was to absorb crystal nuclei, which was the fastest way. The crystal nuclei of the same type brought about the greatest progress for paranormals of the same type. However, humans were always bound by morality and bottom lines. Some people would secretly hunt and kill their own kind, but after all, they were a minority. Mutated animals and zombies could eat their own kind without any scruples. Therefore, their evolution was higher than that of humans. It was said that the highest level of mutated animals that had appeared so far was level 5. As for zombies, there were no rumors about them. Chapter 212. Xiaoqing and the others caught some mutant animals for food and went back smoothly. At this time, Xiaoqing naturally didn't know that the whole Jingdu was in chaos because of her, especially a certain acquaintance. He was in disbelief the whole time until Xiaoqing left. On the way back, the whole team was in turmoil. It was night time, so those who needed to sleep naturally had to sleep. There were 4 tents in total. Xiaoqing and Little Bun shared one, Gu Panpan and Xiao Tong shared one, and the rest of the men were divided among themselves. But Dumbo threw himself at Xiaoqing without saying a word and hung himself on Xiaoqing. Yin Chiyue, who was originally quite reserved, also threw herself at Xiaoqing and hung herself on the other side. If Xiaoqing wasn't a zombie and was stronger than ordinary people with superpowers, the 2 men would have fallen to the ground. "What are you 2 doing?" Xiaoqing said helplessly. Erdai didn't know how to speak, so he stared at Xiaoqing with pitiful eyes. His eyes were full of, "We have been separated for so long. I really want you to sleep with me. Anyway, it's not the first time we sleep together. I can also help you look after Little Bon." Xiaoqing wanted to refuse, but she couldn't think of a reason. She turned to look at Yin Chiyue. Yin Chiyue immediately said tearfully, "Previously, you were considerate of my body and slept with me. You even got up in the middle of the night to find medicine to make soup for me. Now that you have them, you don't want me anymore." "I don't care. I want to sleep with you." Xiaoqing thought for a while, then tore the 2 men from her body and threw them out. Erdai and Yin Chiyue, who were thrown at the door, were speechless. Xiaoqing slept until 11:00 in the middle of the night. Xiaoqing's 5 senses were very sharp, so she immediately sensed that someone came in. She didn't even bother to move, because the person had already climbed to the double sleeping bag. This sleeping bag was modified and was dismantled to look like a mattress on the floor. In the past, Erdai also liked to sleep together. The 3 of them couldn't sleep together, so they had to dismantle it. As soon as the person came over, Xiaoqing knew that it was Erdai without even opening her eyes. Erdai was lying in front of the sleeping bag sneakily. He looked at Xiaoqing and her mother for a while, then he sneaked into the bed. When he first came in, he was afraid that he would wake Xiaoqing up and be kicked out, so he slept by the side with his limbs curled up. But soon, he involuntarily turned into an octopus and wrapped himself around Xiaoqing's body. Not long after Erdai came in, another person lifted the door curtain and sneaked in. This person was more decisive than Erdai, and he crawled into the bed without saying a word. Then, that person was stunned, because there was an Erdai lying on Xiaoqing's body. As expected, the one who strikes first gains the upper hand. Yin Chiyue gritted his teeth as he thought. Then he wrapped himself around Xiaoqing's other side. The two of them looked at each other, and neither of them was willing to show weakness. Lying in the bed, Little Bun was very uncomfortable from being squeezed. He hugged Ye and nudged Yin Chiyue with his little butt. Xiaoqing reached out and scooped Little Bun up and put him on her belly. Her action made the two men stiffen, and they wanted to shrink into a corner so that they wouldn't be discovered. Xiaoqing put a finger to her lips and whispered, "Shu, don't wake the baby up. Otherwise, I'll kick both of you out." When the two men heard that, Xiaoqing tacitly agreed that they didn't have to go out tonight. They were instantly happy. They also knew that it was because of Little Bun, so they were very well behaved and quietly shrank back. Little Bun slept very soundly on Xiaoqing's belly. He felt that the icy coldness under his body was very comfortable, and he purposely rubbed a few more times. Chapter 213. The night passed uneventfully. When Xiaoqing woke up the next morning, the men sleeping on both sides of her had become octopuses that wrapped themselves around her body. Xiaoqing wanted to get up, but she had to wait for the two men to wake up. She helplessly opened her eyes and counted the crystallic nuclei in the space for a while. When she finished counting the high-level crystallic nuclei, the two men woke up with a steamed bun. The first one to wake up was Air Dai. When he woke up, Yin Chiyue also woke up. Air Dai was still in a daze, with a strand of hair sticking up on his head, which made Xiaoqing have an urge to rub his head. Yin Chiyue, on the other hand, had a different style. He lazily lay on the side and yawned. The corners of his eyes were a little moist, which made him look especially charming. Both of them were the best men, but Xiaoqing acted as if she didn't see them. She carried Little Bun and got up to move her body. If she wasn't a zombie, half of her body would be numb and stiff after one night. As soon as Xiaoqing walked out, the two men immediately followed her. Thus, when Xiaoqing opened the curtain, she attracted countless gazes. Gu Panpan and the others all looked at Xiaoqing and the two men beside her. Especially the one who was in the same tent as Yin Chiyue and Air Dai. Their eyes all revealed the same message. I thought he woke up in the middle of the night to pee, but he ended up in Xiaoqing's tent. Shameless. Especially Gu Panpan, who couldn't wait to punch Gu Chuan. Why couldn't her brother learn from these two people and be thick-skinned and pester them? At least he could enter the tent and cultivate some feelings. Xiaoqing expressionlessly ignored those strange gazes and then led Little Bun, who hadn't woken up yet, to brush his teeth. Recently, Little Bun had a new hobby, which was to brush Ye's teeth. As a mutated rabbit, Ye was the boss of all the rabbits, but in Little Bun's hands, it could only whimper and be manipulated. Little Bun pulled Ye's three-petaled lips and squeezed some toothpaste onto his toothbrush. He brushed Ye's front teeth very seriously. His sharp front teeth were brushed until they shone brightly, but Ye's eyes had already turned white. Imagining a rabbit being forced to pinch its mouth to brush its teeth, Xiaoqing somewhat sympathized with Ye. After the whole family brushed their teeth and washed their faces together, Xiaoqing washed her hands and prepared to make breakfast. The assistant was still Yin Hanqing. He squatted on the ground and picked the wild vegetables, then cut them into sections and slices them for Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing's group was the most leisurely paranormal team. Other than them, no other paranormal team could eat fresh porridge in the wild. The porridge wasn't plain porridge, but a variety of porridge, such as spinach and shrimp porridge, vegetable porridge, fish porridge, 8 treasures porridge, and the most common porridge was all kinds of wild vegetable and meat porridge. It was almost different every day, which made Gu Panpan and the others' appetites very good. Even before the apocalypse, they didn't eat so much every morning. Xiaoqing was worried about their nutrition, so she often went to the nearby forest to get some bird eggs and wild eggs and cooked them for breakfast. There was no shortage of milk and other things. It was rare to see such a comfortable life after the apocalypse, and even more so among paranormal teams in the wild. When paranormal teams were in the wild, they would cook their own dry food, roast it, or eat it. At most, they would hunt some wild animals and roast them. It was rare to see someone like Xiaoqing, who was particular about the taste of the food, soup, and dessert. Chapter 2:14. After breakfast, the group continued on their way. When they left, they also drove the car that they had driven here. There were 2 cars in total. One was driven by Yin Hanqing, and the other was driven by Xiaoqing. Just as Xiaoqing carried Little Bao into the car, Dai and Yin Chue took the initiative to squeeze into the car. Each of them took a seat. Gu Panpan wanted to stuff Gu Chuan into the car, but with Xiao Tong in the car, there was no more space. Thus, she could only sit in the car driven by Yin Hanqing with her brother, Fu Jingma, and the others. Xiaoqing didn't need to look back. Through the rearview mirror, she could see Dai sitting on the left, Yin Chue on the right, and Little Bao holding Ya in the middle. Little Bao blinked his big eyes, looking left and right. Then, he began to pout and crawled towards Xiao Tong's seat. Little Bao crawled into Xiao Tong's arms, and Xiao Tong hugged him with a faint smile on her face. Now, in Xiaoqing's team, the one who improved the fastest wasn't Yin Hanqing, who had the lightning ability, or Gu Chuan, who had the ice ability, but Xiao Tong. She benefited from the special crystal hanging around her neck, and now, she was infinitely close to level 4. With a little stimulation, she could become the second level 4 ability user in the team. The one who improved the second fastest was Yin Hanqing. He turned from an ordinary person to an ability user, so he could endure hardships and was the most hard-working one. Without Xiao Tong's cheat-like abilities, he was the only one in the team who was second only to Xiao Tong. As for the slowest progress, it was probably Dum Dumbo. If zombies wanted to evolve, the fastest way was to eat human beings, especially paranormals. Human flesh and blood could provide them with a huge amount of energy, far more than the energy provided by zombie nuclei at the same level. Paranormals could provide them with even more energy. What was the relationship between Dai and Xiaoqing before? Xiaoqing didn't know, but after following Xiaoqing, he definitely didn't eat even a bite of flesh, which caused his progress to be much slower than normal zombies. Now, most of the zombies had evolved to level 2, and some of them had evolved to level 3. There were even quite a number of level 4 zombies, and some level 5 zombies. However, Dai was still at the peak of level 2, which was why he was easily captured by Abe Shizuk's men. Although Dai's fighting power was comparable to level 3 zombies because of his special body, he was still far behind other people. So, Dai was actually a little depressed. A long time ago, when he first met Xiaoqing, he didn't even have emotions. But now, he had learned those complicated feelings, and even learned to keep the unhappy things in his heart. However, Xiaoqing was very clear about his situation, and she was already thinking of a way. She would never let Dai eat humans. If Dai ate humans, what was the difference between him and those ordinary zombies? Moreover, things like flesh and blood were addictive. Just like her, she had to drink some of Yin Chiue's blood in a special situation. Now, every time there was a full moon, her thirst for blood would increase infinitely. Xiaoqing didn't want Dai to become like that. She hoped to maintain the purity of Dai. At least one day, if Dai returned to normal and remembered everything, he wouldn't find out that he had eaten his own kind. Xiaoqing was thinking while driving. Human flesh and blood could make zombies evolve. What about mutant animals? Could it also work? Soon, Xiaoqing denied this idea. She had eaten a lot of cooked mutant animals, but she spat them all out. Although she hadn't tried raw meat, the effect wouldn't be different just because it was raw. Chapter 2:15. Or, the blood of mutated animals might be useful. After all, mutated animals contained a lot of energy in their bodies. Normal paranormals like Yin Hanqing often ate mutated animals, which was good for upgrading their superpowers. Xiaoqing thought about a lot of things, but all of this could only be confirmed after an experiment. While she was thinking, she suddenly saw a person lying on the road in front of them. It was a woman, wearing loose pink clothes, covering her belly with one hand. Her hair and clothes were a little dirty. Xiaoqing immediately stopped the car. Before she ran over the woman, Yin Hanqing also stopped the car. It might be a pregnant woman in front of us. Let's go and see. Xiaoqing got out of the car first, followed by Yin Chue and Dai. Xiaoqing hurried over and helped the woman up. Are you okay? Before the last word was finished, the pregnant woman suddenly stretched out her hands toward Xiaoqing. The nails on her hands were more than 10 centimeters long, sharp, and gloomy. Under her disheveled hair was a half-rotten face. How was she a pregnant woman? She was clearly a zombie. Fortunately, Xiaoqing was very vigilant. A pregnant woman lying in the middle of the road was very sudden, so she would definitely be more vigilant. If the woman lying on the ground was not a pregnant woman, she would not even stop the car. Although she would not run over the woman cruelly, she would take a detour and leave directly. As soon as the pregnant zombie made a move, Xiaoqing kicked the zombie's chest and then turned around and took 2 steps back. The zombie rolled on the ground, and a pillow rolled out of its bulging belly. It probably knew that Xiaoqing was not to be trifled with, so it got up and went into the woods by the roadside. After a few moves, it disappeared. Yin Hanqing and the others who came later hurriedly asked Xiaoqing, "Are you okay?" Xiaoqing shook her head. Her reaction was very fast, so she was not injured at all. The others heaved a sigh of relief, but Xiaoqing's heart was in her mouth. Everyone, be careful. She was worried about nothing but the evolution speed of zombies. How long had it been? There were already zombies who could make such a delicate ambush. If the person who was ambushed was not Xiaoqing, she would probably die on the spot. After all, almost no one would suspect that a zombie would pretend to be a pregnant woman to deceive people. This zombie was definitely very intelligent. She even learned to put a pillow in her clothes and pretend to be pregnant. The intelligence of the zombies was already very scary. Don't forget that Xiaoqing and the others were still in a relatively remote place. The more remote the place was, the smaller the population, and the weaker the zombies that came out. The zombies near or in the big cities had eaten a lot of people in the early days of Doomsday. Their evolution speed was much faster than the zombies in these remote places. But the zombies in these remote places had already learned to deceive people. Then, how far had the zombies in the big cities evolved? It seemed that people were not scared when they said that there were already level 5 zombies. According to the evolution speed, level 5 zombies were normal. This encounter made Xiaoqing even more eager to become stronger. Although she was already strong among the superpowered people, the zombies were evolving. If she couldn't keep up with them, she wouldn't be able to escape the next ambush so easily. Xiaoqing now had a lot of people around her who needed her protection. She had no right to be capricious. She had to work hard. After going back to the S-City survivor base, we will take a big task. Xiaoqing took a deep breath and then said, on the way back, they would definitely encounter more zombies. When they encountered zombies, Xiaoqing would let Gu Panpan and the others fight. Then, she would see how much their strength had increased during this period. After all, one had to know oneself and know one's enemy in order to be victorious in every battle. Once Xiaoqing had a clear understanding of Gu Panpan's strength, she would be able to go back and accept missions based on their strength and go out to gain experience. Superpowered people could not become stronger by hiding at home and constantly absorbing crystals. Without going through life and death battles, superpowered people could not withstand a single blow. Think about it. One was a tree that grew tenaciously in the wind and rain, and the other was a flower that grew in a greenhouse. How could their fighting strength be the same? Xiaoqing hoped that each of her friends could grow into a towering tree. Then, even if there was an accident in the future, when they were separated, they could protect themselves. Chapter 216. Xiaoqing originally thought that the zombie who pretended to be a pregnant woman would know her place and would not appear again. She did not expect that at night, when Xiaoqing was sleeping, the curtain would be opened. For the past few days, the two men would go back to their own tents to sleep in the first half of the night. In the second half of the night, they would silently sneak into Xiaoqing's tent, one on the left and one on the right. They almost turned Xiaoqing into meat buns. But tonight was different. When the curtain was opened, a faint smell of blood mixed with a rotten smell floated in. Xiaoqing originally thought that it was air dye and yin qiue, so she was too lazy to open her eyes. But once she smelled that smell, Xiaoqing knew that it was definitely not those two who came. This rotten smell of blood usually appeared on zombies. Xiaoqing immediately opened her eyes. The vines had already broken through the ground. The zombie that sneaked in did not face Xiaoqing directly. It lowered its head and rolled forward to avoid the vines. It reached out to grab Little Bun. Coincidentally, Yi was lying on Little Bun's stomach sleeping. When the sound of something breaking through the air sounded, it opened its eyes groggily and instinctively took a bite. The zombie's flesh was stiff and rotten, so the taste must be terrible. After Yi took a bite, it lay on Little Bun's stomach and vomited. This was probably the most disgusting thing it had ever tasted in its life. Yi's bite exposed the zombie's target. The reason for its sneak attack tonight was actually Little Bun. Xiaoqing did not say anything and first threw out a lantern flower. That lantern flower was picked by her when she was in the forest. Because its color and shape were unique and it could glow at night, she kept it. As soon as the lantern was thrown out, it hung on the roof of the tent, and the pink light illuminated the entire tent. The zombie was also exposed. She was wearing a pink dress with a tattered collar. Her exposed chest was a mass of rotten meat. Xiaoqing was familiar with this zombie. Wasn't it the scammer zombie they met during the day? This zombie was very bold. It dared to attack them in the middle of the night after messing with them during the day. Xiaoqing wasn't going to let it go this time. She closed her fingers, and the vines that emerged immediately formed a cage-like cage, trying to trap the zombie inside. However, this zombie was very smart. When it saw Xiaoqing attacking it, it didn't even try to fight back. It just turned around and ran. However, it was unlucky. When it turned around, it ran into Dai, who was also attacking at night. Dummy was shocked. It reached out its paw reflexively and slapped Dummy back into the tent. Dummy happened to be caught by the formed cage. The zombie was still restless after being locked in the cage. It kept trying to use its claws and teeth to break the vines. However, Xiaoqing's vines were stronger than it expected. Its claws were almost broken, but it couldn't even scratch off a single thorn. Xiaoqing used the vines to hang the cage up and hung it at the entrance of the tent. After all, the scratching sounds made by the zombie would disturb Little Bao's sleep. After everything was settled, Xiaoqing opened the blanket and said to Dai, "Why are you still standing outside? Go to sleep." Dai didn't say anything and crawled into the blanket. He happily hugged Xiaoqing's waist. Originally, he tried to rub Xiaoqing's chest. In the past, he often used this action to take advantage of Xiaoqing. After taking advantage of her, he blinked his eyes and put on an innocent expression. However, this time, he was slapped into the blanket by Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing used a lot of strength. Dai's face was facing down. His nose was sore. In the past, this move had always worked. Why didn't it work this time? Dai told Xiaoqing accurately that when he saw the Little Bun, he also had an impulse. His subconscious told him that if he ate the Little Bun's flesh and blood, it would bring him a lot of improvement. Moreover, as the Little Bun leveled up, the temptation would become even greater. However, Dai had intelligence. The biggest difference between humans and beasts was that humans could use their intelligence to overcome their desires, while beasts could only succumb to their desires. Dai could control his urges, but ordinary zombies couldn't. This was also the reason why there were zombies coming for the Little Bun. Chapter 218. Xiaoqing couldn't help but worry. Little Bun had become the target of zombies, and he didn't have much ability to protect himself. If he was left alone, it would be too dangerous. Little Bun also had a special ability that was similar to devouring. He could devour a lot of things, such as superpowers and people's vitality. His devouring also worked on zombies, but the amount of energy he could devour was limited. Last time, when Little Bun devoured Xiaoyu in Lin Chuan's survivor base, the energy in his body expanded for a long time before it was digested. Xiaoyu's level wasn't high. If it were a level 3 superpower user, Little Bun would probably only be able to devour a small part of the energy. If he tried to devour it forcefully, he would probably explode. When Little Bun reached level 3, he would be able to devour as much as he wanted. However, he couldn't devour too much, and his devouring ability would only work when he came into contact with the other party. This ability was actually quite useful. Most people wouldn't guard against a 4 or 5-year-old child. However, Xiaoqing couldn't bet that those people or zombies who had evil intentions towards Little Bun would show mercy to him. Therefore, how to protect Little Bun became a big problem, especially zombies. If they caught Little Bun, their first reaction would probably be to eat him directly. Xiaoqing couldn't let her son be too far away from her. Not to mention her line of sight, it was best to keep him within a few meters. Only then would she feel at ease. It was useless to think too much. The best way to deal with it was to deal with it as it came. Xiaoqing thought about a lot of things, but in the end, she could only sigh and look at Yiya in Little Bun's arms. Although Yiya's fighting ability was pitifully low, it could still be of some help if something happened. Xiaoqing made up her mind to train Yiya. On the road this time, Yin Qiue was the one driving. Then, Xiaoqing began to rummage through the stock. After rummaging through the stock, she opened Yiya's mouth and began to feed him. No, it was feeding him like a rabbit. The things she fed Yiya were all good stuff. Some of them were high-leveled zombie crystal nuclei. Most of them were around level 2. She and her companions had no use for them, but to Yiya, they were already high-leveled crystals. There were also some plants that were beneficial to the evolution of mutated animals, as well as the crystal nuclei in the mutated animals. In short, Yiya was in pain and joy the entire morning. After walking for less than half an hour, Yiya had already risen to pinnacle level 3. Although its pinnacle level 3 was not as strong as those ferocious large beasts because of its race, its attack power was definitely not as strong as those ferocious large beasts. Also, because it was filled with crystals, it was much weaker than the average pinnacle level 3 mutated beasts. Most importantly, Yiya was timid. When she thought about it, she suddenly felt that it was useless. It could be roasted and eaten. Yiya couldn't help but shrink its neck. It felt its anus tighten, and its entire body turned cold. Its rabbit fur couldn't help but stand up. After leveling up, Yiya was thrown back into Little Bun's arms by Xiaoqing. Yiya was still very happy at that moment. It was especially grateful to Xiaoqing. If it had succumbed to Xiaoqing's strength and didn't dare to escape, it wouldn't have done so now even if someone else asked it to. Soon, Yiya felt that it would be better to run if there was a chance. This was because during the afternoon break, Xiaoqing started to treat Yiya like a dog. The reason was that Yiya was already at level 3, but its combat ability was still very weak. Its reflexes and other aspects weren't high, so it still needed to go through a certain amount of training. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.